From the Sky News Centre at 6. Thousands of displaced Palestinians are returning home to northern Gaza for the first time in more than a year. A key crossing for people on foot has reopened this morning, with citizens seen carrying belongings including mattresses and blankets. Israel delayed allowing them access until Hamas released a civilian hostage. Arba Yahoud's now due to be freed on Thursday. British-Palestinian dual national Mohammed Galayini lost family in Gaza.
The infrastructure and health service needs, they are massive, and without hospitals being rebuilt, suffering will continue.
Colombia's agreed to accept US military planes carrying deported migrants after a bizarre row put the countries on the brink of a trade war overnight. Donald Trump threatened punishing tariffs after the Colombian president initially turned them away and described America as boring. A man's been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a police officer was hit by a car. It happened in Cheadle in Greater Manchester on Saturday night. Today marks the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp at the end of World War II. The King will attend an event at the site in Poland later. Manchester United boss Ruben Amorim says their 1-0 Premier League victory at Fulham shows the team needs to be given patience to win.
We control the ball, we understand the momentum, when go a little bit slow to the throw-in, when take a little bit time, when do you have to return to play against with the centre defenders.
Tottenham lost 2-1 to Leicester. Aston Villa were held 1-1 by West Ham. Rangers are now 10 points off the top of the Scottish Premiership. It's following a 3-1 victory at Dundee United. And yellow weather warnings remain in place as wet and windy conditions sweep across the UK again. Central and southern England and Wales have seen flooding. That's the latest. I'm Vader Silver.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is...
Good morning and welcome. It's 6:02. I'm Mike Graham, and sometimes miracles do happen. It is as early in the morning as you like. It's a new Monday morning. I'm delighted to say I'm rejoined, I might say, by Emma Trimble, who's here. Last time you were here, you had a slightly different name. You've been married since. I'm sorry to give away all this information, but welcome back to Talk.
I'm so happy to be back.
This
is like a full reunion.
It's like a reunion, absolutely right. I had no idea until quite late last night that you were going to be here. Anyway, so she's going to be running through the papers with us, looking at all the big stories, which are multiple this morning, as you might expect. We're going to kick off, obviously, with Donald Trump, because he finally made a phone call to Keir Starmer, and Keir Starmer could not believe his ears. Downing Street said they had 45 minutes together. So far, so overstated, I think. I think it's probably more like about 5 or maybe 10 minutes. But anyway, Donald Trump doesn't seem to stop working. He's got such an incredible work rate. In the midst of all of that, he was playing golf. He was getting rid of some problems with Colombia, who were telling him that they weren't going to take any of his migrants that he was sending back. He then threatened to pull all the money that he gives them. And suddenly they were taking the migrants. This guy has been working non-stop for a week now, and now apparently he's planning to make a state visit to come and see Keir Starmer. If you don't know how to do it, let us just remind you how to send us a voice note.
Morning, Mike. It's Simon from Devon.
Morning, Mike. Great show as normal.
Good morning, Mike. It's Shirley here in the very frosty Cotswolds.
Morning, Mike. Brian from Southend. Monday morning, stuck in traffic as usual, but with your show to listen to, makes it a bit bearable.
Yay! Yeah, there's the old countdown from Starmer. A couple of funny stories this morning as well. GPs are telling us that basically this whole surge in mental illness is actually people just suffering a little bit from stress. Half of people in Gen Z, believe it or not, or Generation Z, whatever you want to call them, would apparently rather be ruled by a dictator, which makes perfect sense to me, so maybe I'll put myself forward. Also, a strange one, it turns out that sales of harmonicas have gone up, thanks to the Bob Dylan biopic. We'll bring you all of that, plus fears of a recession. Because, of course, everybody now knows that Rachel Reeves doesn't actually know what she's doing. 0344 499 1000. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. 5 minutes past 6. Welcome to the start of yet another wonderful week. It's been very stormy. And officially, good morning to Emma Trimble. Good to see you, Emma.
I am so chuffed to be back.
Great to have you
really
back.
Am.
I mean, the weather's been a bit awful, hasn't it? I mean, yesterday I took the dog to the beach. Didn't realise it was quite as windy as it was. Nearly got blown into the sea. And apparently there's about 3 more storms right behind. It's going to rain every single day this week.
I saw some footage of a guy in Cork who looked like he was about to be blown over. And actually, by comparison, here in London, it's not too bad.
No.
I was in Ireland over Christmas when we had one of the big storms. I can't remember what it was called. And the wind was so strong that I tried to get onto a beach. I physically couldn't. It was like being up against a wall. I was being sandblasted. It was like nothing I've ever seen before.
That's the first bit of land as well from when you come all the way across the Atlantic, isn't it? So it's that much worse.
It's like 20-foot waves. Really incredible.
Incredible stuff. Well, let's get on with it because Donald Trump seems to be the story of the morning so far. Last night they put it out, did they not? With great glee, Downing Street, because normally they don't put things out straight away. Oh, he's had a phone call. You know, Donald Trump has suddenly made a phone call to Keir Starmer, so all's well with the world. So all of these lefties who were telling me, we don't care about Donald Trump, that's why we didn't go to the inauguration, that's why we didn't want to be invited there, that's why we don't want to hang around with misogynists and racists, are all going, he's had a call, you know.
It's all of David Lammy's friendly comments.
Yes, he's had a call, you know, the president has finally got in touch.
I think they're worried they're going to get the Columbia treatment, aren't
Do you
they?
think so? Isn't that incredible, though? Tell the story, because I think people may not know. It happened sort of late yesterday, didn't it?
Yeah, so the Americans sent back a host of, I think they were criminals, weren't they? Colombian criminals.
Yes.
On a military plane back to
promised.
Colombia. The president of Colombia refused to accept the plane, tried to turn it back, and in response, President Trump dealt with things as things ought to be dealt with, as I wish we would, by announcing a whole host of various restrictions on Colombians travelling to America, various
financial
tariffs.
aid packages.
He put a 25% tariff on all Colombian goods.
Right.
And immediately what happened? The Colombians not only did a U-turn, but also offered their presidential plane to bring...
and it was all sorted out while Donald Trump was apparently on the golf course. So he was on sort of the 6th hole when he decided to first find out about the fact that this had happened. And by, I think, 2 holes later, by the 8th hole, it had all been sorted out. And, I mean, the guy just seems to not stop working. I mean, ever since he's been in, and he was crisscrossing the country yesterday, ended up in Vegas at one point, and then he was in North Carolina, and he was seeing the fire victims in California. I mean, the work ethic of this guy is quite remarkable.
He's the only world leader who seems to have not aged dramatically in office. I mean, the guy's got stamina like you can't imagine. When we see, you know, prime ministers who are obviously not operating at the same level as Donald Trump, and they look haggard within about 2 weeks. And he's just Duracell bunny. He just keeps on going. He's showing the world how to get stuff done. That's how you do it. You have to be robust. And it's interesting that people have criticised him saying, you know, the usual commentators that you would expect saying, oh, well, you know, not terribly diplomatic. I think it's fantastic diplomacy.
Absolutely.
Would you say it works?
Yeah. Well, diplomacy doesn't seem to get you very far.
They seem to be defining diplomacy as things that don't work.
Yes, exactly.
Not in your interest.
Exactly. Let's have a look at a couple of clips, because over the weekend, Rachel Reeves suddenly came out of the limelight because she's been hiding for a while. So you haven't really seen much of her for a long time. Rachel Reeves was talking to, I think, Trevor Phillips, first of all. Here she is talking about going back into the European Union through perhaps a back door.
Well, it was really interesting to see Maroš Šefčovič this week suggest that Britain might be welcome.
The EU Trade Commissioner.
Yeah, that the UK might be welcome in that pan-European and Mediterranean customs framework.
I mean, she's not the greatest orator, is she? And I mean, she wasn't any better on Laura Kuenssberg either. She just doesn't seem to be able to answer a quite straight question.
Oh, it's the plague of mediocrity, and this government isn't perfect. We've had this problem for a very long time, but when you look back on Prime Minister's questions from, you know, the era of Thatcher and Tony Blair. The quality is just so high. And to be fair, I think Kemi Badenoch has single-handedly raised the quality of Prime Minister's question time. But when you look at some of the MPs and the speeches that they give, and the people that are in this, Rachel from Accounts.
Yes. Well, Rachel from Accounts is the boss of Darren Jones, who's been wheeled out the last sort of 2 weekends, and he's the sort of the vegan deputy who just looks like a gust of wind would blow him over. And I know that's not necessarily a disqualification for being a politician, but he's just so kind of insipid. He doesn't really say anything.
Well, that's the thing, actually. The whole thing is insipid. Keir Starmer's response to Southport was a perfect example of, I mean, insipid is being kind.
Yes.
The whole thing is insipid and mediocre, and Rachel Reeves not even able to sort of get her words out clearly.
Well, she keeps talking, and I was saying this, I made a little video just before the show, which we'll haven't managed to get out yet. I'll put it out soon. She keeps talking about growth as if it's something that we could all see. But we can't see it because nothing's growing. And we've got Dyson on the front page of the Times today, a very successful businessman, Sir James Dyson, who has accused the Chancellor of vindictiveness by changing inheritance tax rules, says that family businesses employing 14 million people are going to be fleeced. And she's busy telling us all about how concentrating on growth and, you know, the economy has to be stimulated, and that's what we're doing. But they're not, except they're not doing it.
Yeah, just wait until these tax changes are implemented.
Yeah, in April.
We'll just be seeing small companies folding. I'm sure that there are people across the country, probably people who are listening to this show, who own small businesses and are tearing their hair out, to put it lightly.
Oh, for sure.
Because particularly for, you know, small family businesses, this is existential.
Yeah.
The idea that this is going to result in growth, I'm not an economist.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I should say, unlike Rachel Reeves.
Unlike Rachel Reeves, who not only is an economist, but she studied economics at the London School of Economics. You have to get the whole
quite like Rachel Reeves. I am not an economist.
Yes.
And I can tell it. You know, it's just pure common sense that if you raise national insurance in this way and you make it more difficult to employ people, not only will those companies fold, but they won't be able to expand because they're not going to be able to employ people. And if you don't have businesses expanding, then how on earth do you have
exactly? And also, if people
region?
have less money in their pocket to spend, they will spend less money. Therefore, they will stimulate the economy less. Therefore, the economy will shrink. It's very straightforward. And we saw
the telltale signs of that before Christmas because retail was down.
Yeah, absolutely. Piece of the Telegraph on page 17. Fears of a recession are growing after business chiefs said they would be forced to ramp up job cuts as Rachel Reeves' tax rate hits growth. Bosses in the private sector say they expect a significant fall in activity over the next 3 months. And this is the Confederation of British Industry. You know, all of the kind of the business organisations, all of the small business organisations are all saying the same thing. You know, we are basically deep in the brown stuff, and we're not coming out of it anytime soon.
Yeah, and in the run-up to the election, all Labour seemed to do was talk about how they were communicating with business, talking to business. And now, are they listening to business?
Well, what we know is that they're in cahoots with some business, aren't they? They're in cahoots, for example, with BlackRock. They're in cahoots with some of the banks because they're the ones that have instituted all these DEI policies, and they're in cahoots with the sort of people that they invited to the investment summit, who are all the same kinds of companies, you know, sort of rather big multinationals who are very interested in the sorts of things that Labour want, you know, closer ties with the European Union, you know, more diversity, more inclusion, more equity, you know, all of that. But proper businesses, actually, that grow the economy are not keen at all.
Well, I wonder whether, you know, what those companies think of things like the expansion to Heathrow or building all these new homes that don't really tie in very well with their net zero aspirations.
I know, I find that really weird. We've got another clip, actually. Here she is talking about the third runway for Heathrow to Laura Kunsberg.
A third runway will mean that instead of circling London, flights can land at Heathrow. So a lot has changed in aviation, and sustainable aviation and economic growth go hand in hand. We're an open trading economy. We need to bring investment in, but I believe that clean energy, that reducing our carbon emissions are good for economic growth. We can do the two together.
There will be a third runway then. You've more or less just said that.
Well, we'll announce our plans in due course, but already we've signed off expansion at Stansted and City Airport.
The great thing about Rachel Reeves is that she doesn't actually understand what she's talking about, right? Because she then got sort of into a real mess about biofuel, because she then said that, of course, the expanding Heathrow Airport would create cleaner air, partly because planes wouldn't be flying around London all the time, which I don't believe for a second, because the more you expand traffic, the more traffic you get. I mean, just ask Sadiq Khan what it's like when he's building the second Blackwall Tunnel, which is getting worse every day, right? But she then said, but also these planes will be using biodiverse fuel, so actually they won't be so polluting. To which Laura Kunsberg said, well, why are you shutting Grangemouth then? Because Grangemouth is the one place in Britain, up in Scotland, where they can actually produce this fuel, but you're shutting it down. Oh, well, she couldn't answer that one at all. So we're not going to make any of this fuel.
Biodiverse is a good turn of phrase, isn't it? It's very, very this government.
Very much so.
Even the fuel is diverse.
It's literally pie in the sky.
But
literally.
I mean, what you've just described is the common sense deficit again, isn't it? Poor Rachel's had a bad run.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if she didn't change her CV to say that she's a pilot or something to justify her
or
expertise.
An engineer. I've studied engineering at the London School of Engineering. I am an engineer.
At the London School of Pilotry.
Yes, absolutely. Brilliant.
Yeah, like you said, the idea that because the planes won't be circling in the air, that will create less pollution, but you're expanding it so they're obviously going to be more planes, which means that the planes will still be circling in the air because there'll still be a limited area, you know, limited spots where they can land. There'll just be more planes. That's the whole idea. Otherwise, if it's not, then it's not growth, is it? It's not going to grow the economy if there are not more planes.
But also, politicians like her talk about planes as if they've never seen one. You know, they talk about airports as if they've never been at one. You know, planes won't circle around London. Well, when have you ever seen planes circling around London?
But it's interesting that, so they're also announcing this alongside building more homes, particularly near railways and so on. And it's interesting to see that people like Lisa Nandy, Miliband, who have really been on the eco bandwagon, are saying they're not going to resign over this. This is obviously not something that's not compatible with I know they're already sort of trying to push the deadline a bit on the net zero by 2030 as they realise that it's impossible.
It's actually not going to happen.
And in a sense, I'm actually quite glad that about this announcement to expand Heathrow, because I do think that this is sort of sticking the knife into the net zero nonsense. Because the reality is, you know, politically, you know, when you have to. Your policies have to actually come into contact with reality. You realise that this is not something that is possible. And having growth and net zero, as with many of Labour's other policy goals, they are pulling in every direction.
And it doesn't work.
None of it is coherent. The whole thing is completely dissonant. And in a way, when you listen to Rachel Reeves doing the media rounds, and for as many words as she can actually get in a coherent way, you get this sense that it's almost like magical language. They're going to do this and we're going to do that, and these are things that are not necessarily compatible with each other. And it's as if they can just say, oh, we're going to do this,
but they just keep saying it.
But they don't explain to you the means by which they're going to do that. So when they've announced all of this stuff that's also in the papers today about A&E patients being treated at home and having respiratory centres and all of this, and having ambulances come to people's houses in a shorter amount of time, and not having people treated in car parks and in hospital corridors. I mean, it's not all nice for them to say so, but how?
I was going to say,
where's the money going to come from?
Because I mean, if you can't treat people in an A&E, how are you going to treat them at home? How are you going to get somebody to the house if you can't get somebody literally down the stairs?
And surely that
A&E
takes more resources than it would to build more hospitals. To increase the capacity and to actually use the money efficiently in the NHS rather than funding all of these DEI roles, instead to be focusing on, you know, treatment sort of on the front line, nurses, doctors. How are they going to fund and resource sending people to people's houses?
They're not.
It just seems like fantasy land.
Unbelievable. Yeah, exactly right. We've got one more clip to show you just before we take a little break, and this is back to Trevor Phillips' show on Sky. This is Rachel Reeves talking about being called Rachel from Accounts.
Does it hurt you to be described as Rachel from Accounts?
Well, you know, I've probably been called worse things, Trevor, but I became an MP almost 15 years ago now. Before I became a Member of Parliament, I worked as an economist at the Bank of England, and then I worked in the private sector in financial services for Halifax Bank of Scotland. I'm proud of the jobs that I did before I became a Member of Parliament, but in the end, people are going to judge me on the job that I'm doing now, the job that I'm doing as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
So you didn't really answer that one either.
She said it again, though, didn't she, that she was an economist at the Bank of England. Was she or wasn't she?
Well, I mean, nobody seems to be very sure. I mean, people say she might have been some kind of an economist, but I think just to say you're an economist at the Bank of England, I mean, it's a bit of a broad area, isn't it?
I like the sharp end of that blade that he's stuck in. Does it hurt you, Rachel?
Yes.
Does it hurt you?
Exactly right. Rachel from accounts, I'm afraid it's going to stick. This from Ginny, who says, Mike, thanks to Rachel Reeves, I've just lost my job in an investment bank in the city after 18 years. I've got a mortgage and no partner. Well, there you go. There's one casualty straight away. Rachel from accounts. We've got much more to do. We've got Emma Trimble here. She's back. We'll be back after this right now on Morning Glory.
Government borrowing costs hit a 27-year high, and the pound is taking a pounding. Gloomy economic data is expected to show inflation and growth are off course.
Let me ask again, and can you please be clear? Will Rachel Reeves be your Chancellor for the duration of this parliament?
Rachel Reeves is doing a fantastic job. She has my full confidence, and she has the full confidence of the entire party.
Can Rachel Reeves hold on as Chancellor?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham, and of course this is the home of common sense. It's the one place to come to every single morning from 6 to 10, 4 glorious hours of what is only described as the greatest news show that was ever invented. Plus, of course, we get to say what we want. We're very opinionated, and you can do the same. Here's a voice note from Matt.
Morning, Mike. Matt in Devon here. Just gone through one of the biggest storms I've ever known in my life, to be honest, mate. And just as a little bit of humour, I was thinking, what's the next storm going to be called? I'm putting a name forward. Stormy Daniels. Have a good day, mate.
Thank you very much indeed. I thought you were going to say Stormy Starmer there for a minute, because we haven't had a storm named after Starmer. Emma Trimble is here. I don't feel as I have to say you used to be known as Emma Webb, but I kind of want to, because
formerly
people
known as.
will remember you as Emma Webb the last time you were here. I've got a little list here, because we were talking earlier about Donald Trump finally making the phone call just about a week shy of being president. These are all the people he's spoken to before he spoke to Keir Starmer. Now, people will accuse me of being churlish here, but I just think it's quite funny. Giorgia Meloni, Prime Minister of Italy, who was, of course, at the inauguration. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine. Javier Milei, President of Argentina. King Abdullah II, King of Jordan. Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, President of Egypt. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of Denmark. Presumably that was about taking back Greenland. Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, fair enough. Shalom Zurabishvili, President of Georgia. And they also called Gustavo Petro, obviously yesterday, from the golf course, the President of Colombia, to get the Colombian situation sorted out.
Yeah, some of those weren't necessarily the rosiest phone call, I imagine.
No, but you know what's funny is Downing Street are quite good at sort of pushing out the lines that they would want to push out, and the Times have got one this morning. Keir Starmer expected to resist pressure from President Trump and the British military to increase defence spending to 2.5% because of concerns about the state of the public finances, which you know. I mean, apparently we haven't got enough money. But he just went to Ukraine last week, or the week before, and promised Zelensky another $4.5 billion, didn't he?
Well, he seemed to have enough money to allow people who were working in the Treasury to have their advertising a role that allowed them to have an entire day off a week to focus on gender issues or something to that effect.
Well, here's a sign that things are not perhaps as they should be. I don't know if you spotted this at the weekend. It was Burns night on Saturday night. Being Scottish, I celebrate it, of course. And so I had a little bit of haggis. And the Prime Minister put out this tweet, which had 4 pictures in it, one of which, I don't know if we can sort of nose in on the top one. There you go. There he is with a drag queen.
I think this drag queen's also been critical, I think, of J.K. Rowling, if I'm right.
This is a Scottish drag queen, apparently, from Helensburgh, which is a place I know well. But, I mean, is that really the image he wants to put out there? And an awful lot of people in Scotland were not happy. They were like, is this really how he sees celebrations of Burns Night? And clearly he's under pressure from the people, the gender maniacs inside of the Labour Party to do it. But, I mean, it's pretty sad, isn't it?
It's proving that Number 10 is as diverse as the jet fuel.
It is. And just about as useless.
I mean, this, along with so many other stories that we've seen even in the last couple of weeks alone, I think people just see that they're sort of piddling money down the drain whilst also saying, oh, we don't have money for this, we don't have money for that. And on something like defence, when we face the kind of geopolitical situation that we have with Russia and China and all of the complexities of that, what's recently happened also in Syria and Israel, and, you know, the list just goes on and on. It's endlessly complicated. The world is changing. That list of phone calls and Trump's priorities show the world is changing. And I just think that if they think this is good optics to put this out there, it's wildly irresponsible to
but you know what I think this is?
It should be our number one priority.
And what I think this is, which is even more depressing in its way, is that this is their kind of sop to the left wing of the party, because the left wing of the party won't actually be happy that Donald Trump made a phone call to Keir Starmer. They would rather that Keir Starmer aligned himself closer to Europe, would rather Keir Starmer said, I don't like him, like he used to say when he was in opposition. I won't be inviting him to dinner, was what he used to say. Now he wants to bring him on a state visit. So his left of his party isn't happy with that. So he gives them a little sop to say, I'm going to defy Donald Trump. I'm not going to do what he wants. Oh, really? Well, wait till he makes the phone call that says, oh, here's 25% tariffs on British goods, like he did with Colombia, and then we'll see how fast he changes his mind, shall we?
Yeah, quite. I mean, my theory is that, I might be completely off base here, but I think one of the reasons why Trump is maybe being so friendly with Starmer is, you know, maybe it is to mess with him a little bit,
I think
psychologically, a bit of a game. But I think it can't be completely divorced from Trump's desire to get Greenland off of Denmark, because we have first refusal because of a deal that we signed, I think it was in 1917.
Oh, yeah.
Because at the time, I think we
could all move to Denmark.
Canada was still a British territory, and so it was closest to Greenland. We had first refusal. We still have first refusal. And so maybe that's one of the reasons why. But it was interesting because obviously it was being reported they had a very warm and personable chat. It was a very nice chat that they had. And you saw people like Anna Soubry in the most unhinged way saying, oh, it's, you know, something to the effect of, oh, you know, it's remarkable that we're even talking about how Trump is being nice and so on, that's something, as if Trump is this, dribbling monster or something.
I know.
But
this is how
this is how they would report it if it was any other world leader. They had a nice chat.
Of course. Anna Soubry, of course. I don't even know why anybody talks to her anymore. She's not an MP anymore. She's not somebody of any importance, really. We're going to talk about council tax in a second. Before we do that, you might not have seen this if you blinked at the weekend, but Rachel Reeves and Kemi Badenoch were both on with Laura Kuenssberg, and they were asked about the Beatles because she had an interview with Paul McCartney as well. Check this out.
For reasons that will become clear, I wonder what your favourite Beatles song is, Rachel Reeves.
Well, I'm more of a Beyonce person myself, Laura. But Hey Jude, I enjoy that song.
And what about you? Are you a Beatles fan?
Yellow Submarine.
Yellow Submarine? Well, I'm sure there'll be very popular choices with the audience.
I mean, funnily enough, of course, the press made a huge thing out of Kemi Badenoch saying Yellow Submarine, because obviously, if you don't know the Beatles, you will say that. If you haven't got a favourite Beatles song, you'll say Yellow Submarine. Nobody made anything of Rachel Reeves saying she prefers Beyonce to the Beatles. Seriously?
I think the idea that Kemi Badenoch's favourite Beatles song is Yellow Submarine is actually quite fun.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a...
It's a bit of a Mickey-taking song. It's Ringo Starr's only song, I think, isn't it, that made it onto any Beatles album.
Yeah, it's the sort of thing that you sing in an East End pub when you've had a bit too much to drink.
Exactly.
But the idea of Rachel Reeves being more of a Beyonce gal is
yeah, that's kind
really
of embarrassing.
Hard to imagine.
It is. Probably not true either. That would have to be said.
Maybe if she'd gone the whole hog and said Cardi B, that would have been...
Yeah, that might have, yeah. Or, no, I'm not going to say what I was about to say because he's under indictment, so I better not. Anyway, listen, 6:30, I'm Mike Graham. This is the home of common sense. This from Alan in Merseyside. Rachel Reeves says she's been called worse than Rachel from accounts. I bet she has. And Daniel in Surrey says, regarding the possibility of a Heathrow third runway, what's changed with the we must reach net zero obsession, and who owns the airport nowadays? Well, that's a good one. And Mark in Caterham says, I thought planes circled when waiting to land. Well, yeah, they do. Exactly right. So she reckons now they won't be circling anymore because they'll be able to land because there'll be a third runway. Can you imagine how long it will take, by the way? I mean, China would build about 10 airports in a year. It will take us probably 10 years to build one, won't
Probably
it?
build half the runway, realise we've run out of money.
Yes.
Like HS2.
Oh, and then you'll only be able to land small planes.
And then they'll have to put a bat box over the whole thing.
Right.
And
oh yeah, of course. You know, when you drive past Heathrow Airport as well, they have the M4, which is a motorway, so it should have a 70-mile-an-hour speed limit. Has a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit. Do you know why? Because it says this is a clean air zone. And you go, I can literally smell the rocket fuel, that's just been dumped over Hounslow by a great big jumbo jet because they had to reconnect with the landing gear.
The whole thing is so farcical.
I know, isn't it just? I mean, if you lit a torch, lit a cigarette in a car, you'd probably blow up. It's that, there's that much oil and aviation fuel in the atmosphere.
I can't remember who it was who said if you want to live in a city like London, then you shouldn't expect clean air. If you want clean air, live outside the city.
Exactly right. It's 6:32. We'll be back with more after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
6:34, welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here then. Emma Trimble is here as well. We're looking through some of the stories on the front pages of the papers. And the Daily Mail, I have to say, has got a slightly different one, Emma. 4 million face monster hike to council tax. I thought we just had a monster hike to council tax, but apparently there's a 25% rise coming in some cash-strapped local authorities. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? Because we talk about growth in the economy. Most local authorities are either on the brink of going bankrupt or have gone bankrupt and are just going to keep milking us for more and more money.
And that's the loophole.
Yeah.
So actually, legally, they're not allowed. So it says local authorities are permitted to raise council tax by up to 4.99%. Not sure why it's 99% rather than 5%. Anyway, so that's what they're legally allowed to do. But this is talking about raising bills by as much as 25%.
Right.
And the reason why they can do that is because if they claim that they're bankrupt, then they can basically charge you as much as they like to stay afloat.
Wow.
But of course, people know from their own experiences that it's not just that your bill is going up, but it's also you're getting less for your money.
Yes.
So our bins are only collected once every 2 weeks. If you're in a building with multiple people, that rubbish piles up pretty quickly.
Right.
They're obviously trying to encourage you also to recycle, so they
so
pick
everybody's
those bins
got
up more
65
regular.
different bins, you know. According to the list inside the paper, the council tax hike is going to hit these places worse. Windsor and Maidenhead, 25% up. Hampshire, 15%. North Somerset, Bradford, also 15%. Newham in East London, 10%. Cheshire East, Birmingham and Slough, all between 9 and 10 and 8%.
But instead we should be looking at why these councils are mismanaging their money so badly.
Right.
Because there's no excuse, there's no reason why they should be going bankrupt.
They've got huge incomes, haven't they?
And there doesn't seem to be any accountability for how they actually spend money.
Right.
If maybe it is, it could be a scandal in the local press, very unlikely to become something in the national press.
Yeah.
If somebody were to find out that, as you would with the government, that X is being spent on
Yes.
something initiative that's
Right.
obviously wild and not a good use of taxpayer money.
Yeah.
But I think that there's less of a kind of less attention is paid to the way that councils waste people's tax money. And realistically, councils shouldn't really cost that much to run. The money that you pay to your council should go on almost directly onto the services that you receive, whether it's filling in potholes, whether it's picking up your bins, keeping the high street nice, things like that. And I think that these councils are probably wasting money on all sorts of. I think there was a story recently that they were giving some kind of. Was it like a blender or something like that? Some kind of kitchen device to the elderly.
So
one
just giving them
council.
away, yeah. Well, I mean, one of the
Someone
things
needs
they
to look
say,
into it.
one of the things they say they waste a lot of money on, of course, is social care, because that's kind of, exponentially exploded in terms of how much
But
money.
even then, people have to sell their homes in order to pay for it.
But that's it. So
how?
they because they don't know what they're doing. Again, it comes back down to incompetence, in my view. 75 to 80% of most council tax money goes to pay the people who work for the council and to fund their pensions, because there's so many of them. Half of them, at the very least, don't even turn up for work every day. Some of them are even talking about selling off their buildings because they don't use them anymore.
Well, maybe
because nobody goes in.
Maybe the problem is that the councils have become, and I use the term lightly, too professionalised.
Yes.
And actually, the way that councils, the sort of spirit behind local councils is that people volunteer their time because they have a civic spirit and they want to, but it's something that is democratically accountable and so on, rather than this being something that people see as a cash cow.
But those are the councillors, and those are the guys that don't cost very much money, but it's the people behind the scenes that cost all the money, where you've got, I remember back in 20 years ago practically, when I was working at Edinburgh, the chief executive of Edinburgh Council was making £500,000 a year, and they claimed that was because they had.
But instead, the binmen should be paid well.
Yeah, exactly.
And if somebody actually, I think it's a job for a journalist out there. Somebody needs to go and find out how exactly they are wasting their money. I wouldn't mind betting that they're wasting an awful lot of money on all sorts of DEI initiatives and roles like the NHS that are not real jobs. inclusivity roles and things like that that really are not necessary.
Almost certainly. Before we move on to a couple who flew to Spain and back again in order to buy a car because it was cheaper than travelling by train inside of Britain, let's get back to Donald Trump, because we've got Donald Trump cancelling tax on tips. This is when he happened to pop into Las Vegas on his way back from California, I think. Check it out.
Young waitress. I won't say beautiful because you're not allowed to say that as a politician. Used to be you could say a young, beautiful waitress. This was a young, beautiful waitress, but I won't say that because I feel like I want to continue my political career. If you call the governor won't say it. If you call a woman beautiful today, it's the end of your political career, so I won't do it. But a young waitress, I think you could call young. You're probably not even supposed to say young. Probably supposed to say a waitress. But a young waitress came up and I said, how are you doing? And in my restaurant in the hotel in Trump, I said, how are you doing? And she said, not great, because they're after me so viciously for tips. They just want my tip income and they don't believe me and all of this. And she said, it's terrible. You know, sir, you should have no tax on tips. I said, what? So what'd you just say? No tax on tips. That was about the amount of my consultation. It's true.
So now he's going to cancel the tax on tips.
God, I love him.
And he's now the hero for all young, beautiful waitresses in Las Vegas, who all will probably want to go and work for him. You know, but he is very funny. I mean, he's actually become a very amusing. I said this before he got in, that just watching him campaigning, he's clearly changed. He was quite angry in 2016, even more angry in 2020. Now he's kind of mellow.
He's become a grandfather.
Yeah, but he's funny though. I mean, he's actually funny.
So. The speech that he gave after the inauguration speech, he gave a sort of more casual one
it was a bit
to one of the
rambly,
other rooms.
one, wasn't it?
It was very rambly, but it was also very funny.
Yeah.
I thought, you know, I could fall asleep listening to this. It was entertaining. I mean, he's like a comedian.
He is.
And also, I think, with the tip thing, he's pulled a blinder because as I was in America just before the election and just at the sort of like beginnings of the campaign, and I didn't realise that the tipping culture in America is as it is. Whereas
amazing,
here you can get away without tipping, whereas there, if you don't tip, you've really committed some kind of serious faux pas.
And you've got to give them sort of 20%,
borderline
haven't
criminal.
you? Yeah, and you've got to give them a lot of money as well.
And so I think he's pulled a blinder on this because culturally speaking, this is a big thing.
Yeah.
The fact that he's just listened to this waitress. And I believe him when he says that's the extent of his consultation on it. He's listening to people who are sort of at the, to use a horrible turn of phrase, the coalface of society.
Right.
This is something that it's a small act that will make a big difference for a lot of people in America because tipping is such a big thing.
Yeah.
And also, two birds with one stone, something you're not allowed to say. What is it?
Right.
You feed two birds with one scone is what Peter wants you to say.
Oh, is that what they want you to say now? I'm not saying that.
And so he's not only, you know, made a small change with a big impact, but it's also something that's kind of culturally symbolic for Americans to you know.
Well, it's one of the ways as well that people who, for years, for decades, for probably generations of people have come to America from all parts of the world, and they've ended up working in restaurants, they've ended up working in kitchens, they've ended up working in catering, because that, you know, they used to have a joke in New York when I lived there that, you know, how do you empty the restaurant? You run in there and shout, immigration's coming, you know, and basically everybody runs out of the kitchen and all the waiters leave because they're all illegal, you know, but many of them come in and that's the job of work that they do, and they made their money on tips because they could be under the counter, they didn't have to have a social security card, you know, it's more difficult now in the digitalised society, but basically they could work and earn pretty good money,
and it's a big part of
cash in hand, and they wouldn't be paid very much for actually doing the job, but they'd make their money on tips.
You're saying that Trump is pro illegal migrant, Mike?
Well, you know, wouldn't that be unusual? He probably would have been in the past, you know. Let's talk about illegal migrants. A Cornish couple travelling to Crewe, who live in Cornwall, decided to have a day in Malaga en route, saving themselves £250. Now, I know you've been on the train recently. Basically, they flew 1,300 miles to pick up a new car because where they live in Cornwall, it was going to take them too much. It was going to cost them something like £200 per person for a one-way journey to get to Crewe to pick up the car. So they flew to Spain and flew back to Manchester, and then I presume took a train from Manchester to Crewe, saved themselves a bucket load of money.
I'm not remotely surprised by this. It's interesting given how much everyone's encouraged to take the trains because of the climate and so on, rather than drive or rather than take planes. But the reality is that the train system is so broken, everything's so expensive.
It's really bad.
I flew to Scotland because it was cheaper to fly than to take the train.
It's also complicated because you don't ever know how to do it. I went to Edinburgh, famous. I told the story back in November to go to Alex Salmond's memorial. And you can't buy a ticket, just a straight ticket. You have to buy 2 tickets. You have to go in 2 bits. I mean,
so you did
crazy.
It's called a split save or something.
But
You don't have to do that. You can pay more if you want to.
No, I know, but I went onto the app, right, and basically I just asked for a ticket, and it sort of gave me these choices, and so I went with the cheapest option, and I didn't, as it turned out, have to get off the train at all.
Well, it's so confusing as well with all these different options. You don't know if you're paying too much.
Right.
Whereas, you can... if you book far enough in advance, you can get to the Netherlands for cheaper than you can get to... Even to get to Oxford on a peak ticket, you can. I'm sure if you book far enough in advance, you can get to the Netherlands for cheaper than that, or at least round about the same amount of money. But when you go to other European countries, I'm thinking of places like Oslo. I was astonished by it. Their trains are just wonderful. The ticketing system is so clear. You don't have to speak the language to be able to navigate the railway
Well, you just
system.
want to be able to go, look, I want to buy a ticket from here to there. There it is. Thank you very much indeed. The end. Instead of which, with this country, you get handed a sort of, a book of hieroglyphics, effectively, in some digital form, and you have to go, well, I didn't really want to go via Lancaster, or I didn't want to change over there.
And if you book it on an app, that's one thing.
Right.
But if you pay for your ticket at one of those booths, in other countries you get one ticket.
Right.
Here, they just keep coming out. If you were from another country and you weren't expecting 100 tickets to come out of the machine, and then you have to fumble through trying to find which one, and then holding up the queue. If you were from another country, you might just take the first one that comes out and walk away and not realise that there are another 100 that you've got to wait to come out.
It is just ridiculous. Let's get another voice note. Simon, this time on Trump.
Good morning, Mike. It's Simon from Devon. Oh, Donald Trump is in that full-on art of the game mode with Starmer, isn't he? Saying he likes Starmer. I remember he went to Korea and said he liked Kim Jong-un as well. Oh, I love it. See you, Mike. Bye.
I mean, it's true, isn't it, Simon? It's a bit like you feel like poor old Starmer. He's being played with like a cat with got a mouse. He's just kind of batting him around and then stroking him a little bit, giving him something to eat, and going, "Yeah, you'll be all right." I mean, it's just ridiculous. How about this one from Tony? Mike, which is it, net zero or growth? Has anyone told Ed Miliband about the change in policy? I don't know whether they have, but there's a piece in the Mail today where it says Ed Miliband wants his own personal photographer. You might remember Angela Rayner's got one, so he's now decided, because he's had so many bad pictures taken of himself, particularly the eating the bacon sandwich one, that he wants his own photographer and he wants us to pay for it. It's nice, isn't it?
They don't need
these people think they are?
Well, I think they think they're celebrities.
Yeah, I think they do.
All of them are too big for their boots. Yeah. It's interesting. I think that we were talking about civic spirit in local councils, but there's also an element of, you want civic spirit amongst your parliamentarians. And if you remember the backlash against Rupert Lowe when he decided to not accept his MP's salary personally and instead to donate it in various ways to his constituents, people lost their minds over that, as if he was doing some kind of awful thing. Maybe because they felt that their salary, that they were going to be looked upon as if they were being selfish by not doing the same with their salaries.
Right.
But
I'm sure
I think
that's what they're worried
about. People talk, over and over again in the various ways that politicians are out of touch. But the idea that you would need a personal photographer,
I know,
that this is something that's important, that optics really, obviously optics are important in politics, but they shouldn't be as important as they are. And that bacon sandwich thing, I don't think that made anybody think any less of Ed Miliband in a way. It was sort of endearing.
No, people think Ed Miliband's an idiot, not because he can't eat a bacon sandwich, but because he's an idiot.
And because he wants a photographer.
Right? Well, yeah, and also it's because of what he says. It's not because of how he looks, to be frank. I mean, if he wants to go out and play a ukulele in front of a wind turbine, the answer, my friends, of blowing in the wind, really? Well, people are going to take the mickey, I'm afraid. By the way, sales of harmonicas are up, apparently. This is an unusual one, because of this new Bob Dylan movie, which I haven't seen. Everyone says it's great.
I have.
Have you? Is it good?
I have, which is rare for me because normally I don't see films in the cinema at all. Well, I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, but more so massive Joan Baez fan. So I could not go to see a film that had both of them in it.
Does it do them justice?
I think it's a good. I think Timothy Chalamet is, as much as I dislike his politics, I think he's a brilliant actor.
Yeah.
I think it was a good film, and by the general standards of Hollywood, it was a good film.
Yeah. Is it shorter than 3 hours long?
It is shorter than 3 hours.
God
it is
that.
actually quite long, but I thought it sort of zoomed by.
They've given up making short films. I haven't been to see a movie in the cinema because I wouldn't be able to stay awake.
Well, I went to see The Irishman, and I had to walk out before it was finished because somebody needed to have.
I still haven't finished it. I started about 2 years ago.
Somebody needed the chutzpah to tell him that he needs an editor.
Seriously, yeah, it's true. You know, they've all gone mad. They've all gone, no, I don't need it. I'm such a genius. I'll just do a 5-hour movie or something. You know, ridiculous. Emma is here. Emma Trimble. 6:49 and 10 more minutes to get into some other stories. We've got a few here, including, of course, the one about the CIA. They've apparently come out now and said that it's probably likely that COVID was caused by a leak from a Chinese laboratory. Whoever thought such a thing could be possible? This is Talk.
As they rioted, they said this was a terrorist attack. Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, went onto the television and said, absolutely outrageous, it wasn't terrorism, and you are all far-right thugs. Yeah. And these far-right thugs are spreading misinformation. No, it was Keir Starmer, it was the police, it was the Crown Prosecution Service, it was the local authorities. They were spreading misinformation. They lied to us. Yeah. They said there was no terrorist connection.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 6:53. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, right here with Emma Trimble. We've got a voice note from Dave on council tax.
Hello, Mike. Great show. We all know where the council money's spent. It's on their gold-plated pensions. That's exactly where it's going. Hardly any of it's actually on services like bin collections, looking after the high street. It's all when they retire, retiring at 50 with massive pensions. Anyway, great show. Dave from the Southend.
Dave from Southend, thank you very much indeed. I think they do have final salary pensions inside of most councils, and that's partly why it costs so much money, because it's a massive number of people that are employed, and so they've got these huge bills. Let's talk a bit about...
They're going to get hit by the national insurance hike.
Well, no, you know, because public sector organisations get a refund. So if you're going to be hit by a national insurance hike, the Treasury will just give you that money.
Meanwhile, I think there's going to be a tax hit on cathedral. So
is there?
Yeah, clear that they've got their priorities straight. I think they're giving a huge, bunging a huge load of cash to mosques and hitting the cathedrals with a load of tax.
Unbelievable stuff. Well, we'll come back to that in a minute because there's a story here about the Southport killer I want to do. But first, the CIA believes the COVID-19 virus most likely came from a Chinese laboratory, according to a declassified report. And apparently, this report was released on the orders of President Trump's pick to lead to the CIA, who is a new guy called John Ratcliffe. Isn't it extraordinary? You know, if you said that in 2020, somebody would have come knocking on the door and had you arrested, wouldn't they?
Yeah, shocked, I tell you, shocked.
I know.
We saw, you mentioned Southport, I'm not going to derail it, but when Farage made certain remarks about, I think, you know, being an act of terrorism and so on, Starmer denied and denied and denied, and people were hounded for speculating about it, and then it turned out that actually he was convicted of a terror offence.
Yes.
And there was, I think, even on talk radio at the time, there was some issues with certain material that were put up that were regarded as misinformation that then turned out later to be true.
Right.
This is the problem with the whole idea of misinformation, because at the time it might be considered misinformation, but as certain facts develop, as we come to know more, that misinformation turns out to be true.
Yes.
But the damage has already been done because people have already been silenced for trying to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly right. And so still there will be people out there who don't know what the real truth is, and we'll still find out more, I'm sure, once this inquiry takes place. But let's have a look. We can go back to Rachel Reeves. She was on Laura Kunsberg, as we said earlier. This was what she had to say about the Southport controversy.
It's totally unacceptable, the fact that the killer, before he went on to commit those horrific crimes, was able to access really easily on some of the online platforms such hateful material. And those companies have got a moral responsibility to take that content down and make it harder for people to access it.
Yeah. Because obviously people go around killing people because of what they've seen on the internet. I mean, you know, the story I wanted to bring up, which is in the... And we made a decision, by the way, on Friday, not to mention this guy's name, nor to put his picture up. So we're not going to do either of those things, because I don't think we should give him the credit for that at all. But apparently, according to a review of the failures by the Prevent Counter-Terrorism Scheme, his obsession with violence should have been given more weight. I mean, don't you think that if you're in the government, that's perhaps a more important part of this story than whether or not he was able to look at extremist material? But basically, the Prevent people thought he had an interest in news. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I would say it's probably pretty easy to delineate between somebody who's reading a news story to somebody who's actively looking for, you know, violent extremist material.
Yeah, I mean, well, I, over the course of my career, have researched Islamism, so I look at a lot of Islamist content. Doesn't make me an Islamist.
Right.
This guy, on the other hand, very, very clearly expressed his desire to kill people, talked at a football match about white genocide. You know, this is a guy who
Well, he rang
obviously
Childline, didn't he, and told them he wanted to kill people.
Yeah, he's very explicit, and so... What's strange about the decision not to make a Prevent referral to Channel, which is the way in which this would have been escalated, is that it is actually possible to refer somebody with mixed ideology. They don't have to be an Islamist or far right or anything else. That you can just refer them as a mixed or, you know, unclear ideology, which is obviously what should have happened here. But I think actually the government. Fine to talk about failures of Prevent, and that, of course, we should be talking about all of the various failures that led to this guy being caught in the net and then repeatedly just let go. But I think, as you saw in that clip there with Rachel Reeves, same with Keir Starmer. I mean, the people who are walking around London with machetes and zombie knives have not bought them from John Lewis or from Amazon online. it's the same as we saw after the David Amos attack as well, which was the MP that was murdered by an Islamist. Then all of the talk immediately was about online, as if the guy had been killed by a tweet.
Yes.
Every single time that something happens...
And if I remember rightly, they said in Parliament, MPs should be nicer to each other. And you go, hang on a minute,
Yeah,
one
it's
of them
nothing
just
to
been
do
killed.
with this. He's not been killed by another MP.
Right.
So every single time that one of these attacks happens, the government, whichever government it may have been at the time, always deflects to something else, which is usually something that's easier to deal with, like having two-factor authentication on knives.
Exactly right.
Something that they feel is more within their power than the more difficult issue to tackle. Or they deflect it to something that is just happens to be their pet issue, and that's the thing that they need to deal with.
Exactly right. We're going to have to rush, I'm afraid. Great to see you, Emma. See you again soon. Emma Trimble there with loads more coming up after the news right here on Morning Glory.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is...
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 7. I'm Mike Graham. It is a new week, of course. It is upon us. It's not very nice out there. It's a bit stormy. I can't tell you which storm we've got because we're in the midst of about 4 storms. There was one called Iowin, which seems to have gone. There's another one called Herminia, which I think we got now. And there's another 2 coming before the end of the week. I know it comes up with these names, but anyway, it's going to be wet, basically, certainly in the south of this country, for the entire week. It's going to rain on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so you're going to get some respite, I think, on Saturday, by which time, who knows what will have happened, because the way the news is going at the moment, literally anything can happen in the next 24 hours. We're going to talk about Donald Trump this morning. He finally made a phone call to Keir Starmer on Sunday night. They say it lasted 45 minutes. So far, we've got about 3 paragraphs out of it, so unless they were talking very, very slowly, I'm not quite sure if it was 45 minutes or 4.5 minutes. Also, of course, one here from Andy who says, Mike, probably that wasn't Trump calling Starmer. If it was from an AI bot from that Brad Pitt scam that you had on Play of the Week. Could well have been. Let's get a montage of your thoughts.
Morning, Mike. Elaine here, staying in the beautiful city of York.
Morning, mate. Calling from Ayrshire here.
Morning, Mike. I'm fuming this morning.
Hi, Mike. Jane from Kidderminster here.
Maybe we can fix the foundation.
Yeah, he's going to fix the foundations. Also, according to the Times this morning, Keir Starmer says he's not going to do what Donald Trump tells him. Well, I think you'll find that you will do what Donald Trump tells you, because that's what the president of Colombia found out the hard way yesterday. He said, as the planes were flying back full of illegal migrants to Colombia from the United States of America, we will not let those planes land. We will not let that happen. We will not allow American planes and American government officials to mistreat Colombian citizens, because in the end it's all about freedom of expression. It's all about international sovereignty. I've got no interest, he said, this is the Colombian Prime Minister, or the Colombian President, we are not going to allow the Americans to bully us. 45 minutes later, Donald Trump said, well, if you don't take them back, we're going to put tariffs on everything that you do for us. Everything you send here will cost 25% more, and we'll stop funding any kind of international aid to your country. And guess what? A minute later, the Colombian president said, OK then, not only can you land the planes, I'll send my own plane to pick up some more of them, and we can bring those back as well. So that's the way it goes, I'm afraid, in the modern world of international diplomacy. Donald Trump does not care whether you don't like it. Donald Trump will just pressurise you, and I suspect that's exactly what he's going to do with Keir Starmer. Coming up, we're going to hear more about Rachel Reeves. She was talking at the weekend about all sorts of things, including expanding Heathrow, including online content, which she believes to be dangerous, and, of course, getting back into the European Union through the back door. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. Welcome to Morning Glory. This is Talk, of course. Here's one from Peter in Suffolk on the subject of knives. It says, morning, Mike. Photo ID to buy a knife online. Problem solved. Well, there already is photo ID, apparently, to buy a knife online, because you have to put your ID into wherever it is you're buying the knife from. In addition, when the person shows up with the knife at your front door, you're supposed to show ID in order to take it in. Here's one from Alan in Merseyside. It says, I wonder if Rachel from Accounts is after free Beyonce tickets. Just wondering. Yeah, because she did say that. And Paul from Norfolk says, Mike, why can't we stop and put all civil servants and council workers on a normal pension scheme like everyone else to save billions? I had to give up my final salary pension for a normal contribution workplace pension, so why can't they? Well, it's a very good question, because the reason they probably can't, or does continue to get away with it, is very simple. It's the unions, the trade unions now, who operate pretty much only really with any great alacrity in the public sector. You know, the civil service union, for example, is pretty strong. If you work in an office situation outside of the public sector, you're more than likely not to be represented by a union at all. But let's talk now to Ali Tolhurst, chief reporter at Politics Home. There's a couple of big stories this morning to get our teeth into, all of which probably will surround the Donald Trump issue. Donald Trump finally made a phone call to Downing Street yesterday. Alan, very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike.
So, interesting, isn't it? Because all the people who said, it doesn't matter about Donald Trump, you know, it doesn't really matter if he gets invited to the inauguration, doesn't matter if he doesn't talk to him first. They're all kind of going, he made the call. He made the call. He did. He's now made the call. Everything's fine. But it isn't really, is it? It's not. Nothing's really changed.
No, and I think what's quite interesting is that from the readout, which is, we'll kind of get onto kind of the difference between like a readout, the kind of bland, banal summary, and actually what probably happened on the call. But it's clear from the reporting that they didn't touch kind of some of those key dividing lines, so things like tariffs, the deal with the Chagos Islands, that sort of stuff. And so clearly there is still going to be, you know, this was the kind of the call to kind of just to make nice, to touch base, you know, as they say, but actually it doesn't really cover some of those big kind of issues that clearly are going to come between the UK and the new American administration.
Well, that's why I wonder whether, when the Downing Street said it was a 45-minute call, I'm not sure that it actually was. I mean, I don't really care how long the call was for, but from what I read last night, as you say, the readout, Prime Minister paid tribute to President Trump's role in securing the landmark ceasefire and hostage deal in Gaza. President welcomed the release of Emily Damarai and sent his best wishes to the family. They discussed the importance of working together for security in the Middle East. They also discussed trade and the economy. Prime Minister setting out how we are deregulating to boost growth. Blah, blah, blah. I mean, it doesn't sound like a 45-minute call to me. I mean, I'm 45-minute calls with my sister. We get into a lot more than that. I'll tell you what, you know, we've even covered the Oscars.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'd love to know who writes these readouts, because there's a real skill to them to as you say, to take a 45-minute call, if it was that, and turn it into this kind of 3 paragraphs that really don't say a great deal.
No.
And I think I remember speaking to people who worked for Theresa May and her administration, and the calls that she would have with Donald Trump in his first time as president, and they would go on wild flights of fancy. Donald Trump would talk about all sorts. Theresa May would always be trying to drag him back to the talking points, and never could. And actually, the truth of those calls was often much more interesting and much wilder than those very banal readouts. So I think we'll probably get some more reporting. I imagine there'll be a bit more reporting on this call today, and we'll find out actually what made up those full 45 minutes and what exactly Donald Trump decided to kind of go after Keir Starmer about, because obviously he talked about him in quite glowing terms on Air Force One, speaking to reporters yesterday, but we know that from people around him that he has a pretty dim view of a lot of things that Keir Starmer has been pursuing. Right. So it'd be interesting to see if he did kind of take him to task a bit more than the official readout from the UK side necessarily puts forward.
Right. Well, I mean, he's also got Elon Musk in his administration. He's been calling for Keir Starmer to be locked up. In addition to being, taken out of Downing Street and replaced by somebody else. So, yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, in the old days, you would sort of check what the Americans were saying about this phone call. But, of course, they probably haven't issued anything in America about his phone call to Keir Starmer, because nobody in America knows who Keir Starmer is and cares even less.
Right, well, I'll definitely keep an eye out. But yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. And like I said, he spoke to reporters on Air Force when he talked about where his first trip was going to be. Yeah. Obviously, it's usually, he talks about historically it's to the UK, but he's talking about it's going to be to Saudi Arabia because they gave him loads of money last time and he wants them to give the US more money this time round. But it is clear that he understands that the nature of that relationship, whether he actually is as close to Keir Starmer as would be a different kind of leader. But I think clearly he does feel, though, he understands his kind of commitment, the US's commitment to the UK, and so we could see that kind of state visit happening next year, and it'd be interesting to see how all sides kind of play that, essentially, that state visit, given, as you say,
I'm assuming,
the kind of negative things that said.
Yeah, I'm assuming state visits take a bit of time to set up, don't they? I mean, and if it hadn't really been set up before the inauguration, it's not likely to be happening here, certainly not before the autumn, you wouldn't think, whereas somewhere like Saudi Arabia, where things can be done a lot quicker. He had a conversation with Mohammed bin Salman last week in which he was promised $600 billion from the Saudi Wealth Fund. I think he's probably more than likely to pop in there. And this might come from left field for me, but check this out, right? Piers Morgan is currently in Saudi Arabia, and it would not surprise me if he's there, because it might be that he's got more chance of seeing Donald Trump in Saudi than he has in America.
Well, yeah, there is a good chance of that. I suppose he has had a few kind of those Air Force One interviews over the years, hasn't he, where he's been able to follow where he's going. If you remember last time, actually, Theresa May, they arranged that state visit for Donald Trump to come to the UK, but actually she managed to nip out to Washington and be the first person to go to visit, the first foreign leader to go and visit Donald Trump in his White House. Obviously, that hasn't happened this time round. I don't know too much to read into that, but clearly I think it would have been, if you wanted to speak to him, if you wanted to get FaceTime, I think, with Donald Trump, it would have been easier, I think, for the UK leader to go over there rather than wait for him to come over here, because you say all the kind of pomp and circumstance, you've got to polish the gold, polish the gold carriages and all that kind of stuff for him to be pottering around Windsor. And
he loves all that. He doesn't want to come here unless he's going to get that. I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, they managed to squeeze in that they talked, and he sent his best wishes to the royal family. He's a great big fan of the royals. And
he was waxing lyrical about Prince William, wasn't he, a few weeks ago, all that kind of stuff. So I think if there is a way to kind of to win over Donald Trump, I think it is using kind of the sort of soft power of the royal family and kind of flattery and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, but the other side, of course, of the Downing Street machine is the story that came out in the Times this morning, which presumably is in my view anyway, Labour kind of giving a sop to their left wing, if you like, where basically Starmer saying he's going to defy Trump over cash for defence. He says he's not going to be answering the call to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, because apparently we haven't got the money, which is kind of rich coming from Starmer, given that they found money for all manner of other things. But I don't know whether he's seen what happened in Colombia with the Colombian president. He might want to revisit whether he wants to defy Trump, because he might find himself on the wrong end of a load of tariffs.
Yeah, it's interesting because basically, as soon as the Labour won last year, they enacted a whole series of reviews, one of which was a massive review of defence spending and the whole kind of defence industry in the UK, and that's due to report not until later this spring. And so obviously that is going to, when that comes back, John Healey, the Defence Secretary, said that he'll then talk about how the UK is to set out plans to increase defence spending, and they have committed to going up to 2.5%, not to 3% as some would have liked, but to 2.5%. But clearly there already signalling that that's not going to happen before 2030. So basically not while the time that Donald Trump is in office, because they say that it would mean harder cuts to public services elsewhere. And I think they'll be probably use the fact that other big NATO countries have not been able to increase their defence spending, and obviously Donald Trump's been very critical of them. So obviously it puts the UK on the kind of the wrong side of Donald Trump, but obviously there are other countries that have failed to do so as well. And I think that's definitely something that will definitely come to a head, because Donald Trump was really critical last time round of countries thinking that they weren't paying their way, and certainly this time round with the amount of money that the US is spending on Ukraine and in Israel and elsewhere, we'll definitely want to see other countries kind of pulling their weight more around defence spending. So I think that could be a definite kind of tricky conversation with Donald Trump as they go down the track.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at Rachel Reeves. She was out and about on Sunday talking about a great many things on the BBC, on Sky as well. She's also said that she wants to see a bit of sort of Trump-style positivity, which came out in a speech she made, or an interview she gave just over the weekend as well. But here she was, I wouldn't say exactly setting out her stall with Trevor Phillips on Sky about getting back in with the European Union.
Well, it was really interesting to see Maroš Šefčovič this week suggest that Britain might be welcome.
The EU Trade Commissioner.
Yeah, the UK might be welcome in that pan-European and Mediterranean customs framework.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether she wants to join up with the European Union or with the positivity of Trump. It's not all that clear, is it?
No, and that's definitely been an issue for not just this administration, but previous UKs, kind of in between, America and those big trading blocks with America and the European Union. I think there was some polling in the Observer suggesting that the public want us to be closer to the EU than they want us to be Trump's administration. And obviously, as you say, Maroš Šefčovič, the EU Trade Commissioner, kind of cheekily talked that saying that the UK should kind of join this PEM, which is not the kind of the customs union thing that we left when we left the European Union, but a slightly different kind of trading arrangement. Whether that would anger the US or how it kind of be, but it's an interesting kind of moment. And clearly the UK, as you say, she talked about kind of a bit more kind of boosterism, and that's the problem, is that if you've been very negative about the economic situation for so long, people start to believe it, and we've seen kind of business confidence fall back. Obviously the economy is not growing the way they would like, and so they're searching around for ways to kind of get things going again. And so talking about that kind of positivity, but as you say, she wasn't particularly positive about that. She's about that kind of about
and
that
also
move.
She hasn't really been. I mean, she's been positive latterly about the economy, talking about how it's going to recover and what she's doing to stop it from shrinking. But in fact, if you remember, when she got in first, it was all about how terrible it was, how awful things were going to be, how much worse it was going to get, and the inheritance was terrible. And
the £22 billion black hole, all that kind of stuff.
£22 billion black hole. But they can't really say that continually, especially since in December they borrowed £17.8 billion from the Treasury. So they've more or less doubled the £22 billion black hole in 1 month.
Yeah, I mean, they would say obviously, but then they would raise a huge amount of tax in terms of the national insurance and all that kind of stuff to try and cover a lot of that off. But yeah, you're right. I think the previous Conservative administration was quite good at sort of saying, we were left no money, Labour crashed the economy, etc., and the financial crisis. But you can't use that forever. Essentially, people want to see what you're doing, and I think there was some polling in the Mail on Sunday. It was quite damning of kind of Starmer's leadership.
Yeah, I was just going to get onto that.
Yeah, but kind of the positivity about kind of how they feel about how the economy is going, and that is kind of a big issue as well. I think that often governments of all stripes fall back on this kind of crutch of like making international comparisons or year-on-year comparisons about how things are going. People don't really care about that. People know how they feel and how well they actually feel themselves. And if they don't feel positive about how the way things are going, and they feel better or worse off, rather than better off, then that's a very bad place to find yourself.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I mean, basically, some of the findings from a Lord Ashcroft poll, basically, how have the government's decisions affected you? Positively, 5%, negatively, 43%. Then view on Labour, doing good things, 10%, haven't achieved very much, 41%, want them out as soon as possible, 38%. These are pretty damning numbers. And basically, is Britain on the right track? No, 57%. Is the British economy doing well? No, 82%. It's not looking good for Starmer, and his approval ratings dipped even further than it was last week.
Yeah, and I would normally caution politicians to ignore polling when you're so far away from an election, but the problem is that it tends to affect the way that politicians think when they know that things, and then you kind of chase those numbers. What you should be doing, obviously, is kind of ignoring a lot of that kind of that's noise that's in the background and pursuing the things that you think are the right thing, and hoping that eventually people will come round to it. They'll start to see the effects. The problem is that if you see those kind of numbers and you might have backbenchers coming forward and say, look, we're doing really badly in the polls, we need to switch gears, we need to change tack. And when you start to kind of reverse the things that you're doing, then people don't really like that either, because they think that you're not kind of sticking to your guns. So it's a very difficult place to be in. Essentially, you've got to try and block this stuff out and kind of ignore it as much as you can, difficult as it may be, and kind of crack on if you believe in what you're actually trying to achieve as in government.
Yeah, the problem is they've got so many issues which are a problem for them, and let's just finally end up with Kemi Badenoch, who was also on the morning shows yesterday, talking about why the UK, in her view, needs a dominant culture.
One of the things that I don't think we have been doing in this country properly is having a proper immigration strategy. And many people assume that it's just something that government does. It has to go well beyond government. All of society has to do it. And that's what used to happen when we had immigration in much smaller, much more manageable numbers. And the numbers that we have seen over the last few decades mean that we are getting people having separate and insular communities. The most extreme example of this is what we saw with the rape gangs, where people who'd been coming to this country from the 60s, from a particular region and sub-community in Pakistan, get here, stay insular, not interested in integration, and then you start seeing very, very toxic, I would say evil habits propagating, and no one doing anything about it because they're separate. We have to make sure that we have a dominant culture in our country, and the people who move here want to help make the UK a better place. Our country is not a hotel, it's not a dormitory, this is our home.
And that's another problem for Keir Starmer, because he can't really have those conversations. He doesn't like having those conversations. His party doesn't like having them. But the country wants them.
Yeah, it's interesting though. I mean, the phrase "dominant culture" I think is quite I don't know. It's a bit of a tricky one, I think, to try and pass out. And I think Kemi Badenoch was quite good at assessing kind of the problems there. And I think most people would say that actually there has been a failure of integration in certain communities, and that's something that people want to improve on. She didn't really talk about kind of the way that you would go about that. She didn't really talk about. She talked about changing immigration policy, but she doesn't have any policies. She didn't talk about how actually she would solve that. So I think if she's going to keep diagnosing these potential problems with the UK, I think for people to take her seriously, she kind of has to come up with some solutions. And I think you're right. While it's a tricky position for Labour to find themselves in, and they've not been able to put forward policies that are having a material impact on immigration and those kind of other stuff, I think Kemi Badenoch is in a tricky place as well, because unless she actually sets out how to solve that, she's going to seem
but she's playing Labour at their own game, isn't she? Because that's of course what Labour used to do. Labour used to say you've got to fix this, but then they wouldn't say how. When they got elected, they found out that actually they couldn't fix it either. So it swings and roundabouts. But listen, Alan, we've got to run. Thank you very much indeed. Alan Tolhurst there, Chief Reporter at Politics Home. Let's get a voice note from Liam.
Good morning, Mike. Liam and Folkestone here. Now, it's great what Trump's doing with regard to the illegal migrants from Colombia. What's to stop us doing the exact same thing with France? All we need to do is say, right, you're not fishing in our waters, revoke their fishing rights, say we're not taking your cheese, we're not going to buy your wine, we're not going to take your cars. You can bet your bottom dollar that Macron would fold.
Yeah, of course he would. But we haven't got the cojones for that, have we? Because there'll be somebody in Down Street going, oh, yeah, but what if the EU then bans us from exporting anything to the European Union? Yeah, well, so what? Our biggest partner in exporting is the United States of America. Somebody's got to have to get tough at some point. Otherwise, we might as well just fold and give up. 0344 499 1000. Paul in the Cotswolds says, Trump coming for a state visit could be interesting, as Khan has said he won't let him into London. Oh, really? Well, we'll see about that, shall we? Sadiq Khan not letting the President of the United States into London. He doesn't want a third runway at Heathrow either. He's talking himself out of a job, I think, the way things are going. This is Talk.
have Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, saying, I'll deliver for working people. When?
You can already see that wage growth is the fastest in 3 years, with take-home pay after inflation being about £20 higher a week than it was before. We've seen evidence from the IMF, who have uprated our prospects, saying that we are going to be the fastest growing major European economy over the next 2 years.
If you really were pro-growth, you'd be cutting tax, you'd be increasing the scope of it, but you seem to be making ideological decisions.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:26. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the home of common sense, the one place to be. It's Morning Glory all the way through until 10 o'clock. Let's get a voice note from Chris.
Morning, Mike. Chris from Epsom. I think you're being so unfair with Rachel from Accounts. She's told us there's nothing to worry about. We're going to have 6 interest rate cuts this year. So I think you're being a little bit unfair. Anyway, did I tell you the story about the aliens visiting me last night?
No, you didn't. But unfortunately, they seem to have cut you off before you could explain any further. But yeah, 6 interest rate cuts, really. How fascinating that would be. We're not quite sure where she got that from. The other problem for Donald Trump, of course, and Keir Starmer's relationship is that Keir Starmer put out this tweet when Donald Trump met Boris Johnson. An endorsement from Donald Trump tells you everything you need to know about what is wrong with Boris Johnson's politics and why he isn't fit to be Prime Minister. Which is not really very helpful if you want to be best friends, best buddies with the most powerful man in the world, the 47th President of the United States of America. Let's talk to Paul Harris now, though, editor of the Jewish Telegraph. Paul, a very good morning to you. Welcome.
Good morning.
More hostages released at the weekend, thankfully. So we've got some good news to impart. Finally, I understand you were present when they appeared.
Well, I was in hostage square on Saturday, absorbing all the emotions there, and my goodness, the emotions were running high, really, really high. Any differences were put apart. There were no protests against the government. There was a sheer unbridled joy, a lot of tears. Feelings were running very, very deep indeed. And it's something unlike anything I've ever experienced before. It was really, really, really emotional.
Incredible to watch just on TV, so I can't imagine what it must be like to physically be there. Thankfully, the 4 young women actually looked reasonably well, didn't they? I mean, obviously nobody could possibly know what they've been through and how awful it was for them. They were also released by Hamas in sort of what looked like army uniforms, which was sort of their, I suppose, version of propaganda, wasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, we now understand that the backdrop, I don't speak Arabic, contained Hamas propaganda. The way they were paraded on stage was not pleasant, no. But the looks on their faces really transcended that. The sheer joy on their faces told it all. And seeing them reunited with their families, I think it would take a hard man or woman for it not to bring tears to their eyes. But countering that, looking at the images on screen at the moment of the behaviour of Hamas. I mean, they're not militants. These are terrorists. Yeah. I mean, it's the way to release hostages. I'm sorry to say, but this is the new breed of Hamas. This is the next generation of Hamas. Yeah. This is alarming. It's frightening to watch it. Yes. Really, really, really alarming. Netanyahu has made it his aim to rid Gaza of Hamas, to rid it of all the terrorists. Looking at this, I'm afraid there are plenty more.
Unfortunately, yeah, because, I mean, the terrible thing that image gives me is it gives me a reminder of what happened on October the 7th when they returned to Gaza in all those pickup trucks with hostages, some of whom were already dead, parading them through the streets, spitting on them. You know, it's that kind of vibe, isn't it?
It looks absolutely identical. The scenes are not dissimilar. And, you know, I've just come back from Israel. I'm speaking from a hotel at Heathrow at the moment. I got back late last night. I've been down south. I've been for the second time in a few weeks to the site of the Nova Festival. I've spoken to the relatives and friends of people who were killed by Hamas, murdered by Hamas. I've met people who lived through October the 7th, 2023, listening to their horrendous stories, walking around the kibbutzim, seeing the houses where people were deliberately burnt alive. I walked in the remains of these houses and to see people's belongings. They're still there, a lot of the belongings, suitcases, personal possessions, children's toys. It's alarming. So, you know, it's bittersweet, this, very bittersweet. It's tinged with sadness, how, you know, there's the joy of the hostages being released, but there are so many more there, and we have absolutely no idea what condition they're in, whether they're alive, whether they're dead. I mean, they're being sadistic, Hamas, the way they're actually doing the hostage release. We know there are babies still there. We don't know their fate. We don't know some of the older people, what their fate is. We don't know what's happened to some of these women. We've heard rumours of pregnancies. So it's bittersweet. It's tinged with sadness. But Israelis would just love to see the rest of the hostages released. This is what it's all about. You go all over Israel. There are posters there. Bring them back. You walk through the airport, and it's absolutely heartbreaking walking back through to departure area where there are teddy bears. There are even bags of crisps and sweets, some of the favourite snacks of the youngsters who are still being held hostage. You've got football scarves of the team that some of the other hostages support. It really, really is still heartbreaking.
It is, yeah. Absolutely awful.
You know, it's bittersweet.
Yes, absolutely. And the next phase of hostage release is expected when? I'm looking at pictures this morning of thousands of Palestinians returning to northern Gaza now as we speak, after a hostage agreement. Yet another hostage agreement has been reached. They've released another 200, I think, Palestinians from prison in Israel. And so I guess the nightmare will go on for a while.
It will, but I think we mustn't forget that there's a parallel. Today is Holocaust Memorial Day.
Yeah.
This is a parallel because the state of Israel was born out of the ashes of the Holocaust. And, you know, I made a trip to Auschwitz a couple of weeks ago and featured it in my newspaper. I've been many, many, many times, but nothing inures you to what you see there. No. The sheer scale of the murder. I mean, this was a killing machine on an industrial scale. And this is why Israel just cannot tolerate terrorists in their midst. This is supposed to be a safe haven for Jews. This is what the state of Israel was all about. And yet Israelis are living in daily fear of terror attacks, rocket attacks, and there's a very, very much a parallel with Holocaust Memorial Day.
And the ceasefire, I guess, at this moment anyway, is still holding from both sides, yeah?
Yes, I'd like to believe that it's going to last, but I'm very dubious. I mean, people tend to forget this is only a 6-week ceasefire. It's only a cessation, a pause in the hostilities. I think if there is even a minor incursion of any sort, if there's any minor transgression by Hamas, the Israeli troops will be straight in. You know, I've seen they're still very much there on the border. I was on the Gaza border just last week, and you know, the troops are there. They're waiting. If anything goes wrong, they'll be back in, believe me.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Paul, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Paul Harris, editor of the Jewish Telegraph, there reporting in from his travels. He was in Israel at the weekend when those hostages were released, and thank goodness from their family's point of view, and more hostages to be released on Thursday of this week. As I say, footage now being seen of civilians returning to northern Gaza, which they weren't able to do until relatively recently. It should be happening now. Let's get a voice note from Jacqueline.
Morning, Mike. I don't understand what's the difficulty in tracking a knife being bought online or in a shop. Why don't we just put serial numbers on knives? You have to produce ID, fill in a form, anyone that buys a knife, and then that way, if it goes missing, we can trace it back to that address. The serial number will be on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can take as many precautions about knives being bought online as we want, but, you know, at the end of the day, you don't need to buy a knife online. You can walk into your mum's kitchen or your dad's kitchen or your sister's kitchen or your own kitchen and pick up a knife and walk out into the street with it and stab someone with it. You know, unfortunately, you know, the Southport Killer's knife, as it turns out, was one that was bought online, but it didn't have to be bought online. You can buy them anywhere. That is the problem. You know, and it's not so much the knife, but I know this is a phrase that they used in America a lot when I was living there. You know, guns don't kill people, people kill people. Well, they're saying the same thing now here about knives. Knives don't kill people, people kill people, and that's to some extent true. Charles says Labour need that third runway for all the millionaires leaving the country. He's absolutely right. Stuart says, morning, Mike. Great that it's Monday again and great to see Emma on. I've been saying for years that our leaders should tell countries like Pakistan that all aid will stop if they refuse to take back their criminals, but they're too weak. Trump just proved that playing hardball is the answer. If only Trump wanted to take over the UK. Well, you might not like that, but I can see what you're saying. Stuart, thank you very much indeed. 7:35, we'll talk some more about Donald Trump. Coming next with Amy Tarkanian.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through. How about this from Dan in Sidcup? Why not use Northolt Airport as the third runway? It's 9 miles to the north of Heathrow. It could link via monorail. Not a bad thought there. I don't know what you know about Northolt, though, that I don't know. I mean, I suppose it's big enough to take some of the biggest jets, but whether or not it would be allowed to, I don't know, because you've already seen, if you know that part of the world, the lights on the road that go past it, the A40, are already like miniature lights, because apparently they can't have very tall lights, which tells me that they haven't got a lot of room for manoeuvre. I don't know. And I remember this from John in Sutton. Mike, what a cheek of Badenoch banging on about immigration. When they were in power, they made immigration 10 times worse. I will vote reform. A lot of people say that, and a lot of people will do that. Let's talk now to Amy Tarkanian, Republican strategist, the former chair of the Nevada Republican Party. Amy, very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Quite a busy weekend for Donald Trump. I mean, he doesn't seem to stop. I don't know when he sleeps. I mean, every single day he seems to be doing something kind of quite big. For example, yesterday during a game of golf, he managed to completely turn around the Colombian president's foreign policy on migrants in the space of about 45 minutes. And then he managed to get a phone call in with Keir Starmer as well. That's just two things that he did in a very busy weekend.
Correct. And it seems to be not just daily, but it's literally, as you just relayed, minute by minute, where he is making some pretty drastic changes. And they're ones that the American public is grateful for. During his first term, I think he learned a very hard lesson when he campaigned on draining the swamp, found out how difficult that actually was, and was surrounded by people who were, basically halting and stopping him at every turn. And so he came in extremely prepared, along with his cabinet nominees. They made sure to do their due diligence to try to sell themselves to the Senate and make sure that he had his executive actions ready to go within the first hour of him taking the oath of office. So this is a man who is going to be extremely aggressive, as we are already witnessing, on every avenue, whether it be national security, international or domestic, whether it be with the economy, and as you just mentioned, whether it be with other world leaders, on making sure that he truly means America first, and that we are no longer being taken advantage of.
Yeah, I don't think any of us are in any doubt about that, because he really is absolutely pushing through with everything that he promised to do, which is so refreshing to see when you've got an actual politician that does what he said he would do. He's also been quite amusing. He's been crisscrossing the country, ended up in Vegas at one point over the weekend. Let's have a look at what he had to say about Joe Biden.
And I walked up the stairs of that massive plane that's waiting for me, that big 747, and I said, there's no way I'm going to let myself fall, because that was one hell of a... That triple fall was a disaster. I would call that a political disaster. You can fall once, you can fall twice, but you can't fall 3 times. You can't fall 3 times. What a disaster. I've used that in every ad I think I ever did.
I mean, he's got a point, doesn't he? You know, you can fall once, you can fall twice, but that really did contribute massively to people's just kind of lack of faith in Joe Biden and his ability to do anything.
Sure, and historically left-leaning entertainment shows like Saturday Night Live also recently poked fun at him and showed old video footage of him falling off of his bicycle.
Yeah. Well, some of us have been doing that for a while, but I mean,
right.
it's only now that the Democrats are able to be critical of him, because for so many years they pretended it wasn't happening.
Right, which is unfortunate, because it really did not just Americans a disservice, but the world, and we all were clearly seeing a man fall apart before our very eyes, which was not okay, despite your party affiliation, and they continued to lie about him, and it was very unhealthy. But
I think so. I mean, do you think the American psyche has recovered from that, or do you think the American sort of political system has recovered from that to the point where they actually realised that it was a bad idea to cover up for it?
I think people were disgusted and angry, and rightfully so. You want to have the leader of your nation and the leader of the free world be someone who is of sound, mind and body, and somebody who is going to have your back and make sure that he is clear and ready to go at every given moment. And that clearly was not what was happening, and we all know that now. And so I think we have every right to be angry.
Absolutely right. Also, here's another one, another clip of Trump. It's also talking in Las Vegas at the rally about Joe Biden.
Our country was on the verge of some of the very bad things, and bad things were happening. And now there's light not only over America. I've heard it from even our enemies. They call up and they say, sir, we hate you. We do hate you, but there's light over the world right now. They hate me. Some of them hate me. If they liked me, you got a problem, right? They like Sleepy Joe. What's not to like? They'd call up. It's funny. I was told today by one of the big leaders of the world, would call for a telephone call with the President of the United States a year ago. And they'd say, we'd like to speak with, who is this? It's the head of Germany, the head of, name it, the head of France, the name of any country, it didn't matter. He would never pick up the call. They'd say, he'll call you back in 2 months. 2 months. Yeah, it's his schedule. He's extremely busy sleeping. No. Macron of France, he'll call you back in 2 months. So 2 months comes along and there's no call. They say, he didn't call. The stories are, I mean, these stories are not very exaggerated. I want to tell you, they're a little bit for laughter, but, you know, it's only for laughter. The fake news will say, oh, he exaggerated. It was only 1 month, you know.
I mean, he's got quite a talent for comedy, hasn't he? I mean, which we're now seeing, and I've said this earlier on in the show today, that he's a much more relaxed individual than he was back in 2016, and he's much more kind of, just much more easy to look at. He's funnier.
Well, it's a lot easier to be a little bit more jovial and lighthearted when you have the Republicans in charge of the Senate, the House, and now you also oversee the executive branch.
Yeah.
So he's going to be able to push through his agenda. It's still not going to be easy, but it's going to be a lot better than his first term. So he has every right to be smiling. And I believe him. I don't think that actually truly was a joke. I believe that that's actually what happened. You know, I hate to quote Putin, but Russia's President Putin actually said it before, that Biden was predictable and Donald Trump is unpredictable. And that's something that I think is going to benefit this incoming administration. As crazy as many people may find him, it's good to keep the world on their toes.
Yeah, absolutely right. So what's he going to do this week? I mean, you know, it's a bit like that question at the end of the Super Bowl, isn't it? I think I'll go to Disneyland. You know, it's like,
Right.
He's only been in a week. He's done quite a lot.
Yes, he has. And I think the fact that it's actually a breath of fresh air. Is he going to be able to get everything accomplished that he throws out there, especially some of his executive actions that are a little bit more controversial, like ending birthright citizenship, you know, focusing heavy on the south and northern borders in the way that he is by setting military. You know, he's going to be found with a number of legal battles. But the fact is, as you mentioned at the top, he campaigned on these promises, and he's putting them all out there. How they will end will be left to be seen.
Absolutely right. He certainly seems to be cutting into the illegal migrant business, that's for sure, if what happened in Colombia yesterday is anything to go by. We'll come back to you, I'm sure, soon. Amy, thank you very much indeed. Amy Tarkanian, Republican strategist, former chair of the Nevada Republican Party. It really is all happening in the United States of America. Talk of a state visit being made here, but possibly not for a while. It's 7:47. Let's get a voice note from Mark.
Morning, Mike. It's Mark in Lancashire. I just want to take issue with something that Alan Tolhurst just said about the Kemi Badenoch interview, when he said the phrase dominant culture is a difficult one to pass out. Well, what's difficult about it? What's the dominant culture in Pakistan? What's the dominant culture in Iran, Saudi Arabia, virtually the whole of the Middle East apart from Israel? We know what the dominant culture is there. It's Islam. That's not the dominant culture in Britain. The dominant culture in Britain is the British culture. Why do these people find that so difficult?
Yeah, it's a very interesting word, difficult, isn't it? That's what people say. Lefties say difficult all the time. Oh, it's a bit difficult. Well, it's not difficult. I agree with you, Mark. It's not difficult at all. And as you say, there are plenty of countries with dominant cultures. What's the dominant culture in Germany? Germany. What's the dominant culture in Sweden? Sweden. What's the dominant culture in Italy? Italy. You know, what's the dominant culture in Britain? Oh, difficult to say. Well, why? Be a good point, wouldn't it? We've got storms galore, by the way, so Simon Calder's going to be here, our man on the railway lines. We'll find out what's going on out there, what the roads are like, what the trains are like, what the planes are like. This is Talk.
And I asked the question, was this man known to the authorities? Can we please know the truth? And Jonathan Hall KC, who's the terrorism czar, said many, many times, tell the public as much as you can without prejudicing the trial. I was demonised. I mean, Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, many MPs, many broadcasters, newspaper columns said that I'd incited the riots by simply asking for the truth. I think the riots happened in many ways because of that lack of information. Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 7:52. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until, of course, 10 o'clock. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be along with her show for the next 3 hours after that. We've got plenty to talk about this morning, including, of course, all the storm activity. I've been looking at the old weather forecast, and I'm afraid it looks like rain from now until Saturday, pretty much. I can see a reasonably high cloud ceiling outside the windows here at Talk Towers, but let's talk to Simon Calder, our man with his finger on the pulse of the travelling nation. He's travel correspondent, of course, for The Independent. He looks like he's at another station. Where are you, Simon? Very good morning to you.
I'm at good morning, Mike. Good morning, everybody. I'm at London King's Cross, where there was great jubilation at 5:48 this morning because it was the very first train to go to Scotland from here since Thursday. That shows you how bad things have been. Everything wiped out on Friday, of course, for Storm Eowyn. And then we had rail engineering works over the weekend. And so that knocked everything out. There's more this coming week. So if you really want to travel between London, King's Cross and Edinburgh, then it's a really good thing to do that before by Friday. Over on the West Coast main line, London to northwest England and southern Scotland, that had massive problems, although they started running trains last night, having said that they wouldn't be able to. In Scotland itself, well, quite a lot of trains are running, which is a good thing. But now we're kind of getting disruption from Storm Erminia, if I may. We've got flooding between Reading and Taunton, fallen trees south of Guildford. And, well, we've got a bit of kind of disruption as usual. So there's cancellations to and from here due to more than normal numbers of trains needing repairs at the same time, and our old friend, the electricity supply failure in the Blackheath area of southeast London. Blimey. So once again, I'm afraid things are not as easy as they might be.
Well, I once did travel to Edinburgh from King's Cross last November. I think I probably told you the story of how delayed it got on the way back. So I don't think I'm going to bother anymore the next time. I think I'll just take the plane. Were there flights interrupted as well? Because it was quite heavy winds up in northern Scotland, well, in northern England and Scotland and Northern Ireland, right?
All right, Friday was just awful. More than 1,000 flights cancelled in the UK and Ireland, many of them at Edinburgh, Glasgow, Aberdeen, also Belfast International and Belfast City. And we had some spectacular delays as well. So, for example, 15 hours on Jet2 flights to and from Malaga and Rome. Wow. But that was better than the alternative, which was cancelling them. We also had some really spectacular diversions. Planes trying to get in, for instance, to Edinburgh Airport. One of them from Stansted took off, flew to Edinburgh, couldn't land, circled around a bit, and then headed off for Cologne, which technically is in Germany, I think you'll find.
I think it is.
Right, and I'm only going on what I've learnt from a flight tracking service. They got halfway to Cologne over the North Sea, and they obviously made another call to Stansted, who said, all right, we will find room for you, and they managed to land back there. Otherwise, it would have been very exciting for all those people who hadn't got their passports, which you don't need, of course, for domestic flights. But today, I'm afraid, in the skies, we've got another 36 cancellations in and out of London Heathrow Airport. That's because the airlines have been told to reduce their schedules because of the high winds expected. 26 of those on British Airways, and then the remaining 10 on Aer Lingus, KLM, Lufthansa, and so on. So yet more disruption. The airlines say we're going to try and get people on alternative flights. But really, it's been just a horrible weekend, and there's more to come. And of course, strikes return next Sunday on the West Coast main line.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, they had those on Sunday this week, didn't they?
No, they didn't. They were called off, but it didn't make much difference because the weather was so terrible.
Okay.
They called them off over the last. They called them off last weekend, and that made no difference at all because they called it off so late that the trains couldn't be stood up again.
Right.
Then they called it off yesterday, but that didn't make much difference for anybody trying to get.
So this is now the new game, isn't it? The new game in town is to pretend you're going to have a strike, call it off at the last minute so it's too late for you to bother going into work and make any difference to the trade, so you can technically say, well, I wasn't on strike.
Well, you could certainly say that, but the strikes...
Oh, are you suggesting there's something else going on?
Well, the unions would say we're on the edge of a breakthrough and we can't wait to
they would say
get
that,
a settlement.
Yeah,
well,
they
yes,
would. But thank goodness you're not their spokesman. Let me ask you this, Simon. Would things be any better if we had a third runway at Heathrow? Because that's what Rachel Reeves seems to think, including the rather miraculous idea that having more air traffic would actually reduce the nasty quality of the air. In fact, the air would be cleaner if we had more planes landing at Heathrow.
Right. If you had a third runway, and by the way, you're not going to get one for maybe 7 years, if Rachel Reeves said on Thursday we're going to start, there isn't going to be a bulldozer turning up at Heathrow on Friday to start work. But suppose you did have a third runway at Heathrow, you would immediately get immense resilience. So you wouldn't need to cancel those 36 flights. You also wouldn't need necessarily to fly around in circles over the home counties before you land. But of course, the thing is, as soon as you got that third runway, the airlines will say, oh, there's a third runway. Look, can we fly some more planes, please? Yeah. And of course they will. We haven't had really for 70 years any new full-size runways in southeast England. London is the world capital of aviation, and we keep squeezing a quart from a pint pot in quite impressive fashion until it all goes tango uniform, and I'm afraid that's what's happening today.
Yes. Well, it's good to know that some things stay the same, no matter who's in charge of the government. Simon, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Simon Calder there reporting into us from King's Cross, where they finally sent a train to Scotland. I mean, you know, they're talking about putting people on Mars in America. We can't even get people north of Yorkshire, for heaven's sake. How about this from Sam on the Storm?
Morning, Mike. Sam from North Dorset here. We've had quite a lot of flooding over the weekend. Lots of roads closed, etc. Nothing unusual. We just have to go around a different way. Although on the way to work this morning, there was massive sheets of lightning, bigger than I've ever seen, filling the sky. Didn't see that forecast. And the hail that came down was so fast and hard, I could barely see. And the road just went white with all this hail. It was quite cool, actually. It makes the trip to work a bit more interesting, don't you think?
Quite spectacular. Somebody's asking how we've gone from Storm Ewan with an E to Storm Hermania. Yeah, the answer to that is it's actually Storm Ewan with an I. So I think our lot got it wrong. So sorry about that. It's an alphabetical order. Also, we're going to tell you more about the train business because apparently more work needs to be done to encourage women and people from diverse backgrounds to join the industry. I say more work needs to be done to actually run the bleeding trains, no matter who's running them. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 2 minutes past 8. We've already done 2 hours of the first Morning Glory of the week. It is, of course, here all the way through till 10 o'clock. 4 glorious hours of Morning Glory for your delectation every single weekday morning, Monday to Friday. Donald Trump is getting so much done. I dread to think what he's actually going to get done this week. I mean, incredible, really. He's sending migrants back to their home countries at an absolute pace that nobody can quite believe. Yesterday, when the Colombian president tried to object to some migrants being sent back to his country, he was basically threatened by Donald Trump with a load of tariffs, threatened with the reduction of state aid for all Colombia, and within about 45 minutes he folded and agreed that actually it'd be quite a good idea to take the migrants back. And not only would he take them back, but he'd send his own presidential plane to pick up a few more. For heaven's sake, that tells you all about how strong Donald Trump is going to be on the migrant crisis. Let's get a voice note from Steve.
Hello? Oh, hello, Mr. President. I'm looking for Tutti Kia. Is he in? It's me. Some people call me Keith. I just wanted to call you an idiot, that's all. And what you need to do, you need to get Nigel in charge, or I'm going to put your tariffs up. Goodbye.
That was the phone call, of course, between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer. They say it took 45 minutes. The readout from the White House is even shorter than the readout from Downing Street. So who knows if it was 45 minutes long. The fact is that the call was made. I mean, no question at all. Only a week in. And, of course, an awful lot of other people have spoken to the president. I don't think it matters that much. But the reason why I think it's amusing is because of all the people who think Starmer's doing a brilliant job, a very, very diminishing number of people, by the way, who all said, oh, no, we don't want him going to the inauguration. Donald Trump's a ghastly, awful man, terrible misogynist, terrible racist, in fact, a bit of a white supremacist, actually. Oh, no, that was the foreign secretary that said that. Basically, Starmer said he didn't want an endorsement from Donald Trump. It shows how ridiculously out of touch Boris Johnson is, who was actually invited to the inauguration when Starmer wasn't. All manner of things going on diplomatically. There's talk of a state visit. There's talk of a meeting sometime soon. Bottom line for me is that I think Donald Trump is just messing around with Keir Starmer. His approval rating's down to -35. His own party are saying they're not very sure that he should continue as leader. Plenty of Labour MPs now revolting against him. Dan Hodges is here. He's going to tell us what he knows. He wrote a piece at the weekend basically saying that Ed Miliband sees himself as Greta Thunberg. Maybe the sooner they get rid of him, the better. The latest news from the land of Miliband is that he wants his own photographer and he wants us to pay for it. I don't think so. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Also, we've been talking about Kemi Badenoch. She's been talking about Britain having its own culture that needs to be somehow fixed. She doesn't quite make out or tell us exactly what she means by that. And Rachel Reeves has been talking. Nobody knows what on earth about, but we'll try and bring you that as well. This is Morning Glory. Let's get it on. 6 minutes past 8. This from George in Birmingham. Morning, Mike. Loving the show. No better way to start the week with a dose of common sense. Trump has had just 4 years to prepare for office. Starmer has had almost the same amount of time and has achieved nothing in 6 months. I can see reform winning by the same margins as people want change. Well, people do want change, but, you know, it's interesting. There's now all sorts of movable kind of feasts, I suppose you might say, going on. The ground is shifting on the right as well, because you've got Donald Trump on the one hand praising Keir Starmer, telling him we're going to have a state visit organised soon. You've got Elon Musk calling for him to be kicked out of office and locked up and imprisoned, you know, for all manner of assumed slights on the nation. You've got David Lammy now saying that Donald Trump is a great guy. We should be talking to him after previously saying he was a white supremacist and he wasn't welcome in London. So, you know, there's a lot of shifting sands. I suppose much of a muchness. Let's talk to Dan Hodges, see what he makes of it all. Dan, very good morning to you.
Morning.
I mean, I think you'll agree with me on this one, that, you know, the people who put an awful lot of faith in conversations between prime ministers and presidents shouldn't waste their time, really, because does it matter whether or not he has a conversation for 45 minutes or for 5 minutes? I mean, I doubt very much it was 45 minutes, because what's come out of it so far sounds like something I could have done in about 38 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we don't get a detailed readout of what actually happened. We get a summary. 45 minutes sounds like a long time.
It does.
Excuse me. I mean, I was surprised when I saw that. I have to say, though, I mean, they'd have to be careful about lying about it, because obviously there are a number of people on these calls.
Yeah.
So
it's been suggested to me that Keir Starmer might have been on hold for 40 of the 45 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I've got to say, I don't think Downing Street would say they were on for 45 minutes if they weren't, because they'd know it would be very easy for the White House to say that was rubbish. Yeah. So if they say 45 minutes, I'm tempted to believe it. Look, I think in terms of it mattering, I think in the scheme of things, it doesn't matter. The only reason I think it does matter in this instance, though, is obviously we had a number of people saying Keir Starmer was going to be snubbed by Donald Trump, and they weren't going to have a phone call at all for even weeks.
Right.
And I think the one thing that has a couple of interesting things have come out of this. One is it is quite clear at the moment that all the briefings we've had, and it's not just been idle speculation. There have been briefings from people who purport to be around Trump and have his ear, have been saying he was going to snub Keir Starmer, humiliate Keir Starmer at the beginning of his presidency, and he hasn't done that. I mean, we've had the phone call, we've now got the talks of the meetings, and crucially, what Trump has said has been very positive about Keir Starmer. As you point out, much more positive than Keir Starmer was ever about Donald Trump.
But I mean, you're right. I mean, had he not made the phone call yesterday, then it might have started to get into that kind of territory where you're going, well, hang on a minute, what's he doing? But equally, by not doing it straight away, he has kind of messed with Starmer a little bit, and now it feels a bit like he might be toying with him, where he's going, you know what, I'm not going to call you for a few days. I've got to talk to all sorts of people like Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister of Denmark. I've got to talk to King Abdullah II, the King of Jordan. I've got to talk to Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the President of Egypt. I've got to get $600 billion out of the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Do you know what I mean? The list goes on and on.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but I think the point is, you've listed those people here. I mean, obviously, Trump has taken office at a very significant and sensitive time internationally. Obviously, the most crucial thing internationally was in the middle of the hostage release scenario. So, in a sense, it's not surprising. I mean, I do think there is one other thing as well that we have to point out, which is obviously you contrast Trump's comments about Keir Starmer with the almost daily sort of stream of abuse that Starmer is getting from Elon Musk. And I think, again, what it does indicate is this idea that Musk and Trump are joined at the hip, this idea that Musk is going to be influencing in a significant way Donald Trump's foreign policy. I think at the moment all the evidence is that's being overstated.
Yes.
And
I think Trump is very much his own man. I mean, he's appointed a load of people into a load of positions, but he will always be the puppet master, I think, no matter who it is that's knocking around. And I think that's been proven as well with Nigel Farage, in a sense. Nigel Farage would have gone to Washington thinking, I'm the closest guy from Britain to be in the room with Donald Trump, and it turned out he wasn't in the room.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll be completely honest about this. I think politicians on all sides of the political divide have basically humiliated themselves over the last few weeks. I mean, we've had obviously the endorsement, as you say, the very positive words of Trump from Keir Starmer, as you and others have accurately pointed out. It wasn't that long ago Keir Starmer was saying, because Boris Johnson had a good relationship with Trump and was praised by Trump, that was grounds for him to resign. That was it. Obviously, you've contrasted David Lammy's, describing him as a sort of a mini Hitler, and obviously his gushing words now. Equally, we've had the same people on the right. We saw Kemi Badenoch running over there. She didn't even get anywhere near Trump. She had to make do with J.D. Vance. That was a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
You had Suella Braverman wandering around, with a MAGA hat on, frankly, embarrassing herself. And obviously, we've had Liz Truss just completely debasing herself as well as she desperately tries to make herself remain relevant. I just think the whole spectacle is pretty embarrassing, actually. It's, you know, Trump is obviously, you know, the leading global figure. It's absolutely vital we have a good relationship with the United States. But the one mature person, the most mature person over the last few weeks, actually, has been Donald Trump himself. You know, I mean, his comments show, whatever the sort of the stuff swirling around the outsides, he does understand the relationship with Britain is a significant, important strategic relationship.
Yeah. And he's being presidential, which means that the story in the Times this morning is interesting because this is obviously being fed out from Downing Street. Starmer's going to defy Trump over cash for defence, almost as though we must get a line out there that looks as if we're not just his lapdog and we're not just really happy that he's called us. And so here's what we're going to do. We're going to defy him. Well, if they're going to learn anything from that Colombian escapade, where, you know, the U-turn was faster than anything you've ever seen by Lewis Hamilton on the switchback in the Monaco Grand Prix, you know what's going to happen. If he starts defying Trump, you might find himself getting threatened with a few tariffs.
I mean, with great respect to the Times, I think I think the Times are putting a little bit of whip on the ball there. You know, I mean, we've got the Trump thing coming on, and I think that's a very good line. The defying Trump line is a good line for the story. The reality is, he's not defying Trump. The reality is, Keir Starmer hasn't got the money.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
the cupboard's dry.
But he hasn't got the money for a lot of things, has he? I mean,
you know, that's the point. And obviously, we've seen the issues with the broader issues with the economy. We've seen the issues as a result of that with borrowing. We've seen the issues in relation to the debt the debt repayments as a result of that. The reality is the money's not there, and Keir Starmer is facing this nightmare scenario. Obviously, he's made these pledges in opposition. And at the moment, the money just isn't there.
Well, he's also made quite a few payments as well. I mean, he's promised £4.5 billion to Volodymyr Zelensky, you know, which might have an impact on the Treasury.
Exactly. Although he'll be hoping, you know, that again Trump can work his, shall we say, his magic, and that you know his promise to end the war will come good. But even if you do that, then you're going to have reconstruction costs and stuff. So. But look, I mean, this is an issue going forward that we're going to have to discuss, and you know. The reality is we don't have enough money, not just to do the things we want to do, we don't have enough money to do the things we should do. So the question is, over the months and years going forward, what are the priorities going to be? I'll be honest with you, there is obviously going to be a big backlash if Keir Starmer resolves from this 2.5% figure. Trump's going to kick up on it. I think in broader strategic terms, it is potentially dangerous. But equally, I think if you went out and you said to the average sort of voter in the street, look, money's scarce, do you want it spent on schools, hospitals, police, or do you want to spend it on defence? I think defence would probably be relatively low down people's priorities. Whether that's right or wrong is a different matter, but I think that's the political reality that we're...
Well, I mean, if he starts doing things that are according to what people's priorities are, then that'll be something that would be a bit of a shock to everyone, really, because you suddenly find out that he might become quite popular. He doesn't seem to be using that particular route at the moment. But listen, Dan, thanks very much indeed. Let's just remind ourselves of what Starmer did say about Donald Trump.
Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Yes. Ivor says this. Great show, Mike. Ivor here. Ray, the 45-minute call between Trump and Starmer. Maybe there were a lot of meaningful silences. And one from Carl in Shrewsbury says, I think the media have misheard about the length of the call between Donald Trump and two-tier Keith. It wasn't 45 minutes, it was 4 to 5 minutes. Very possibly so. Let's get a voice note from Andy.
Morning, Mike. Listening to Donald Trump, what a funny guy he is. Honestly, I would pay good money just to go and see him talk like he is doing now, what you're playing. Such a funny guy. He should be a comedian as well. I love him. Great show, Mike.
Thank you, Andy. He is very funny. I mean, we'll play some more of those clips coming up in a little while. Coming next, though, we're going to speak to Harry Cole, who is, of course, political editor at The Sun.
Remember that November 2020 presidential election when all debate around Hunter Biden's laptop was shut down. Then the pandemic. If you question lockdowns, you might find yourself suspended on Facebook or elsewhere. That whole social media debate room has completely shifted because of Elon. Now look, he and I don't agree on everything. I don't bend my opinions for anyone.
So your views, you've been very clear about your views on
Yes.
Tommy Robinson.
Yes.
Absolutely no interest in him joining Reform or otherwise.
Let him do his own thing, we'll do our thing, and that's it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 20 minutes past 8. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10 o'clock, of course. It's another week underway, Monday, Morning Glory. I mean, what can you possibly say? The forecast said it was going to rain all day. It doesn't look like it's raining here, but there are apparently some really big problems on the railways, really big problems on some of the roads as well, quite a few trees down. We've got a new storm system coming through, so just be careful if you're heading off anywhere. You might want to check before you travel, as they say. We'll bring you updates on everything that we've got. One from Sarah here who says, "Morning, Mike. Please keep playing that voice note with the spoof of the phone conversation between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer." Well, we will. You want to have a listen to it again, shall we? Come on.
Hello? Oh, hello, Mr. President. I'm looking for two-tier Keir. Is he in? It's me. Some people call me Keith. I just wanted to call you an idiot, that's all. And what you need to do, you need to get Nigel in charge, or I'm going to put your tariffs up. Goodbye.
I mean, I'm sure that's not exactly how it happened. We'll talk to Harry Cole about that in a second. Shall we get one from Phil just before that?
Hi, Mike. Phil in Nottingham here. You were saying that the phone call between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer was 45 minutes. You sure that's not a bit of Chinese whispers? And it was actually 4 to 5 minutes.
Well, you do raise a very good question, because certainly the readout, as we call it in the business, of what was said doesn't seem to be very long. The White House version is even shorter. Harry Cole's here. He'll probably know the truth. Political answer for the Sun. Harry, very good morning to you.
Sorry, you give me the giggles, Mike. Listen, you don't get this on the BBC, do you?
You really don't. I mean, the thing is, I mean, if that was a 45-minute phone call, I mean, somebody said to me, I think you might have spent 40 minutes on hold, you know. I mean, I'm not trying to make fun of it, but, you know, I'm sure he's very happy that he got the call. But you know, if he hadn't got it, probably we'd be saying this morning, well, he still hasn't heard from Donald Trump. But Trump's spoken to an awful lot of other people before he got to Keir Starmer, hasn't he?
He has, but it is the first European country, which still, I suppose, means something. But it has been a week. So, I mean, from my memory, back in 2017, Theresa May had made it to the White House within a week during Trump's first term. He has been sort of lavishing praise on Starmer and Britain generally, as I think Dan Hodges was saying a few minutes ago. But Downing Street are now sort of on tenterhooks of when will they get the call up to scuttle up to the Oval Office like a greyhound as soon as they can.
Yeah.
So back end of this week, could be early next week by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I mean, state visit-wise, though, that takes a bit of time to organise, doesn't it? So if Trump's going to come here, that's going to be a while away.
Yeah, but I mean, we've got some tools in our arsenal for dealing with Donald Trump. Obviously, he loves the royal family. He's always sort of talking about that connection. He's got his picture book, which I think the British government sent him after his last visit. Lots of pictures of him and the late Queen and various royals. So we might as well deploy this stuff. It's kind of unprecedented, actually, because obviously we're in a weird situation, because obviously he's been president before. He's had a state visit, so we have to tear up the rule book a little bit and give him a second one, which I don't think, from memory, no one's ever achieved. Right. But look, if it's soft power. It's one of our biggest soft power exports in the world. You know, the royal people love the royal family. We might as well use them to put on a charm offensive.
Yeah, and of course Rachel Reeves was trying to do her own charm offensive, wasn't she, this week? And your column today, page 10 of The Sun, talks about how she talks a good Trump, but can she walk? a good Trump.
Yeah,
because, I mean, she wants positivity. Well, maybe she should have thought of that in July.
I did, yeah. You can't. When she comes out and says we need to stop talking down Britain and being more optimistic about the economy, you kind of think, well, if only we could find the culprit who's been talking down Britain. Who is it?
Right.
Look, I welcome the fact she's changing her tone. We're desperately needed. Look at the business confidence rates; they've been plummeting since there's a lot to go over the Treasury. And you got to remember, it's very different in opposition. In opposition, you can say what you want, you can say everything's crap, and you can attack the government. But when you're the Chancellor, people listen. You know, you move markets with a raise of the eyebrow. So it's good that she's finally woken up to the fact that sort of words matter, but actions matter as well. And actually, if we look at, she said we need some Trump-style optimism. We need to be more positive. We need to, we need to be a bit more radical in our pursuit of growth. Well, yeah, let's have a look at what Trump's done. He's got rid of the electric car targets. He's tearing up working from home mandates. He's, look how he's dealt with Colombia overnight. Imagine if we did that with the French over the boats. Said, look, if you don't sort the boats out the next week, we're on. Right. Obviously, I'm not suggesting we do that to that extreme level, but it's one thing saying, we need to be more like Trump, but just, look at what he's doing rather than what he says. And that's the most important thing. And you kind of think, the perfect example we've got is this row over defence spending. Now, in opposition and in government, Labour said we will hit 2.5% of GDP. It was in the manifesto. And now it looks like, behind the scenes, they set up this defence review to essentially kick it into the long grass to give them a bit of breathing space because they don't have the cash immediately. And now it sounds like the Treasury are going to win out and it's not going to happen until 2032, which is insane. And Donald Trump saying that European nations need to put up their defence spending to 5%. Obviously, I don't think that's going to get that far. Not even America spends 5%. It's in about just shy of 4%, I think. But somewhere in the middle, you could land on about 3%, and that's way off. And defence experts I was talking to over the weekend said, look, 2.5% is the bare minimum just to stand still, just to upgrade our Trident, our creaking nuclear deterrent. Our stockpiles are empty. We've given so much ammunition and so many missiles to Ukraine. We've got lots of kit we don't necessarily need. We should be massively investing in drone warfare. We've got these giant aircraft carriers, which one of them barely works. We're trying to flog different bits of kit to different countries on the cheap. And this 2.5 is the bare minimum the armed forces need just to carry on doing what they're doing now, which in an increasingly dangerous world is seen as not enough. So big headache coming down the line for the Chancellor and
exactly right. And they keep talking about.
Mike, I should tell you, I've got a terrible sore throat, so sorry if I'm sounding a little bit
very husky. No, it's very husky. I'm sure a lot of people will be liking it. The thing is that we've also got now more people on benefits getting more money than the defence budget, and I mean they keep talking about tackling things like that, which again they haven't tackled. Rachel Reeves at the weekend was out on a bit of a charm offensive, talking about a third runway at Heathrow, but everything's in the future. There's nothing really to speak about growth immediately, and it's not happening. I mean, everywhere you look, the economy's shrinking. Everywhere you look, the CBI are having a go, or the OBR are having a go. She doesn't really have very many friends in the room. She doesn't appear to have much strategy, unfortunately, for what we're going to do in the next sort of 6 to 12 months.
Well, really interestingly, I think the most interesting contradiction about Reeves's chancellorship so far is actually, if you look at the city, look at the big pension funds, the big banks, big finance. They're relatively chill about Rachel Reeves. They don't mind. She's going to let them. She's going to deregulate the pension funds so they can unleash loads of investment. The banks didn't get whacked in a way they thought they might going to be in the budget. And I think Labour was so paranoid about upsetting the quote the city before they came into power and getting a thumbs down. And we saw a bit of a market wobble, but broadly she's been given the room and space to do what she wants to do. But at a cost, she's had to sort of offload the pain that could have gone onto the sort of high finance and put it onto employers. And that ranges from big employers like Sainsbury's, who cut 3,000 jobs this week, or say Amazon, for example, right down to small businesses and pubs and hospitality, who are all basically getting whacked. So rather than hitting what you'd consider, the big fat cats, the sort of city boys of the past you might in your imagination have, actually she's hit, instead of upsetting them, she's put the pain onto the farmers, onto the elderly, onto small businesses. And I think, would you really expect that from a Labour Chancellor? And actually, I wonder whether actually most of Reeves's problems in the next couple of years could in fact come from her own side. Because lots of the stuff she's doing could easily have be done by Rishi Sunak by Jeremy Hunt or any, sort of slightly, centre-right Conservative chancellor. And actually, you'll start to hear, I think, lots of lefties say, well, look, we've got this big Labour government. We're meant to be Labour. Why aren't we doing more Labour-y things? So she's a really fine tightrope to run, and she's going to have to take an axe to the public spending because she is going to miss her fiscal targets. And so, come March, when she gets this OBR update in the spring and it says, well, you're missing all your fiscal targets, implying heavily that's going to come through cutting rather than raising any more taxes, because they know they can't raise any more taxes because the tax burden's already at record highs. So big row coming between Labour and Rachel Reeves in the next few months, I suspect.
Yeah, I suspect there will be. And also there's a lot of people on the left of the Labour Party in Parliament who are not that happy about Starmer either, are they? Because they're thinking, well, what's he doing? He's cozying up to all the wrong people, and he's not really a left-wing Labour leader.
Well, I mean, look, he's got a massive, great majority. I can't even remember what it is. It's so big. It doesn't matter. He can weigh his votes rather than count them in the Commons. So look, he's got room for manoeuvre, which is, But again, look at Boris Johnson. A massive majority isn't what it used to be if your party management falls apart. There's a section of the Labour Party who the sort of Corbynista diehards who will never forgive Starmer for ridding, frankly, I think one of his best things he's ever done is rid the Labour Party of the hard left to get rid of all those trots and all those commies. So, I mean, look, there's going to be a block of them that will never forgive him, but they're fairly muted still. I think where his problems within the Labour Party will come is actually in a similar way to Boris Johnson. You've got all these first-term newbies who will start to cluck about their seats and being re-elected in seats they weren't expected necessarily to win, in seats that Labour don't traditionally have a stronghold in. That when they start to look down the barrel of only being a one-term MP, and you can see what happened to Boris Johnson. About halfway through the Parliament, they were convinced that Boris Johnson actually, rather than being the guy that delivered them their seat, was actually a drag on their ticket, and they convinced themselves it was their own personal brilliance that got them elected in that red wall wave. And I wonder whether a similar thing might happen on the other side, where actually, these people were elected in a Labour landslide. It was nothing to do with their personal campaigns. Whether they will start to flex their muscles and demand more sort of autonomy than they're currently getting. But you're beginning to see it. You're beginning to see it a little bit. For the first 6 months of this government, you had lots of Labour drones all marching through the lobbies, being very well behaved. Now they're starting to flex their muscles a bit. We're starting to get sort of pamphlets and policy suggestions and speeches from sort of people you've never heard of. And I suspect that will just continue to happen as the Parliament progresses.
Yeah, and then one final one for the culture vultures. You have a bit of a pop at Kemi Badenoch today for her suggestion that her favourite Beatles song is Yellow Submarine. I thought Rachel Reeves was worse, saying that she preferred Beyonce, to be honest.
I think it was a genius. It was BBC Laura Koonsberg yesterday morning. I think it was just a warm-up question because she had Paul McCartney on, so she just said to them, "What's your favourite Beatles question?" And it's so funny when you see politicians not expecting a question. Yeah. You just see this blind panic in their eyes because. Rachel Reeves, imagine if she said sort of help or taxman or something like that. And Kemi obviously was a bit like, she clearly said whatever the first Beatles song that popped into her head was, sort of Yellow Submarine, which is obviously, in the Beatles canon.
No, it's probably her daughter's favourite Beatles song or something, right? Because it's the only one they played at the birthday party. But there we are. Very good, Harry. Thank you very much indeed. Harry Cole, police editor at The Sun, of course. Let's get a quick voice note from Tim on Donald Trump.
Morning, Mike. Great show as usual. No, I don't believe that they were on the phone for 45 minutes. But there again, it could quite well be that he was on the phone for 45 minutes, grovelling, saying how sorry he was, apologising for all the Labour candidates, MPs that have been so horrible on personal insults to President Trump. It probably did take 44 minutes to apologise. And then Trump said, thanks for the call, and hung up on the 45th minute. Well, great show, Mike. Keep up the good work.
Very possibly so. Let's have a look at something else that Donald Trump did this weekend. He actually was in Los Angeles, believe it or not, as well as all of the other bits and pieces that were going on. He went to see the LA Mayor Karen Bass. This is a woman that you might remember refused to answer any questions when she was caught coming back from a holiday in Ghana while all the fires were raging. She refused to answer questions from a Sky reporter. But here's Donald Trump putting her very firmly in her place.
You have emergency powers just like I do, and I'm exercising my emergency powers.
You have to exercise them also.
I did exercise them.
Because I looked, I mean, you have a very powerful
declaration.
emergency power, and you
Yes.
can do everything within 24 hours.
Yes. And if individuals want to clear out their property, they can. Well, yes, but you know that you will be able to go back soon.
Mr. President.
We think within a week.
That's a long time, a week. I'll be honest. To me, everyone's standing in front of their house. They want to go to work, and they're not allowed to do it.
And the most important
week
thing
is
is
a
for
long
people
time.
to be safe.
They're safe. They're safe. You know what? They're not safe. They're not safe now. They're going to be much safer. A week is actually a long time, the way I look at it. I watched hundreds of people standing in front of their lots, and they're not allowed to go in. It's all burned. It's gone. It's done. Nothing's going to happen to it. It's not going to burn anymore. There's nothing to burn. There's almost nothing to burn. And they want to go in. The people are all over the place. They're standing, and I say, why aren't you going in? We're trying to get a permit, and the permit's going to take them. Everybody said 18 months. You said 18 months. You said 18 months.
I mean, he's just basically giving it to her and going, just get on with it. Because that's what he does, just gets on with it. Harry Cole, by the way, find his column on page 10 of The Sun every very single Monday, talking about Donald Trump and Rachel Reeves. Front page of The Sun today is a slightly different story. Hit TV show Homes Targeted. If you watched that show Ted Lasso, you'll know that there's swanky houses in a part of London called Richmond Green, and a gang is apparently being hunted after a £2 million raid on homes featured in that TV show, Ted Lasso. So we'll bring you more on that coming up a little bit later on. Coming up next, though, we're going to be talking about what's going on after Southport, because we're going to be joined by Emily Constantas, the global CEO of the Safeguarding Alliance. More than 1,600 terror-obsessed youths, just like the Southport killer, have been left free to roam Britain by Prevent, who I'm going to start saying should change their name, quite frankly, because they're not preventing anything, are they? This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 8:38. I'm Mike Graham with you all the way through until 10. The contrast that you've highlighted between Starmer saying Trump is a danger to now where he's praising him just goes to show you how two-faced, two-tier Keir is. He's got more faces than our town hall clock, and every one of them is disingenuous, says Alan in Middlesbrough. Paul in Hitchin says, great show, Mike. The reason the call to Trump took 45 minutes is that the Labour government is so inept they put Starmer through to the speaking clock. Mind you, that for Starmer would be an in-depth conversation. Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine Starmer having a 45-minute conversation with anybody about anything. Can you? James in Suffolk says, Musk and Trump playing good cop, bad cop. I think that's probably right. There's probably a lot of truth in that. Darren has got something to say.
Good morning, Mike. Darren from Carmarthenshire. Great show as always. I just wanted to comment, Mike. I think you're being a bit harsh on Keir Starmer here. For example, I was on the phone to my doctor's surgery this morning for 45 minutes and I managed actually, Mike, in that time to get an appointment for January 2027, Mike. So, you know, a lot can be done in 45 minutes. So don't be too hard on the guy.
Yeah, they're obsessed with 45 minutes, aren't they, Labour? Do you remember Alistair Campbell? We were under threat 45 minutes from Saddam Hussein. That was what they said. 45 minutes. It must be their default position. You know, how long does it take to get an appointment? 45 minutes. How far away are the dangerous weapons of mass destruction from Iraq? 45 minutes. How long did that telephone conversation take between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump? I don't know, about 45 minutes. You know, it's a recurring theme, I kid you not. Let's talk to Emily Constantes, who is the global CEO of the Safeguarding Alliance. Emily, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us. I'm looking at a story this morning in the Daily Mail, the inside tale of the dreaded situation with this killer from Southport, who I've decided not to name, by the way, so I'd rather you didn't, because I don't want to give him any kind of notoriety, and I'm not going to show his picture either. But basically, what they're saying is Prevent and their counter-terrorism scheme failed repeatedly. When they looked at what he was looking at, when they looked at what he was doing, they should have really given more weight to the idea that he had this obsession with violence, and they shouldn't have just thought, as they did, that he was just somebody that was looking at news stories and was interested in history, which is kind of what they came out with. And also, we're now being told that there could be as many as 1,600 terror-obsessed youths just like him in this country. I think you're muted there, Emily. I don't know if you can try and see if you can fix it.
There we go. I have a habit of doing this every time I come on. I'm muted.
There you go. Sorry.
I'm back in the room.
I can hear you now.
I think that number is absolutely shocking. There's no excuse not to act. We have obviously in the country a prevent strategy. What's the purpose of a strategy if it's not actually preventing? We need to strip it back. Actually, we have inquiry upon inquiry, this failing, that failing. But what do we do post inquiries? We just sit back on our laurels and we get on with our day until something else happens. I'm pleased you're not mentioning his name, and I will refrain from mentioning it either. It's shocking and disgusting and disturbing that actually so many parties were aware by this evil individual, but yet nobody actually took action. Early help, attendance, ECHPs, prevent. Not one person actually acted to prevent this happening. So how many more prevent strategies that we're not preventing are we going to see in the future? We need to now take action. It's not good enough. We've got the four strands, the 4 stages of prevent, but clearly it's not working. And inquiry upon inquiry, we actually need to have action now, not just everybody sitting around in a room and having a chat about it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I mean, I was given a kind of insight into how these kinds of things can happen when I interviewed Lord Carlisle last week. Lord Carlisle is a former Lib Dem who was put in charge of Prevent, the reviewing process of Prevent, up until 2019, when he was removed because apparently he was too biased to have a proper opinion. But he was insistent to me that Prevent does a good job, and I was like, well, how can you even say that? You know, we know in the case of David Amos, the MP, that was a Prevent problem, an issue. The London Bridge killing was a Prevent issue. This is a Prevent issue. I mean, even if it was only those 3 things, which it clearly isn't, then that would be, this organisation is a massive failure, isn't it?
I think it's wider than just the one organisation. What we need to be seeing to have is a joined up approach. Education needs to be speaking to prevent, to the Home Office, to the police, to the health. We need to have joined up. I think this is one of the biggest issues that we have. I think we have this presumption that everything works like clockwork in relation to keeping people safe. But the reality is it doesn't. And what we need to look at is the system is broken. It's not just one part of the system. The whole system is broken. We need to strip it back, start again, and join everything together, and to ensure that we have people speaking to each other when there are concerns, schools raising concerns, attendance. If this person's not in school, how can we actually even keep people safe? We don't know where they are. Again, prevent needs to have that communication going back and forth. So it's not just about just the prevent strategy itself, it's the wider systemic failings that we see in safeguarding in terms of that lack of joined up approach.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because parts of the system clearly do work. You know, he was referred to prevent 3 times. He was monitored when he did things which were considered to be dangerous, like when he brought a knife to school, like when he had to be forcibly removed from a school, like when he called Childline, you know. So all of, you know, I'm not saying that they all did brilliantly, but at least the system worked up to a point where he was at least identified as somebody who could be dangerous. But that's when it appears to have gone completely wrong, when instead of deciding that he was a danger to society and he was a powder keg waiting to explode, they decided that he was fine. And that was where it went wrong, I think.
It is absolutely shocking. There needs to be action. I'm not even going to say an inquiry and a review, because what we need to have is an action. Yeah. Okay, we had this failing. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to prevent that? Here we go, prevent again. How are we going to prevent that happening in the future? How are we going to prevent not acting, really? So that's what we need to see are the actions following on from not just this horrific incident, but the many other incidents before it, and very tragically potentially could come if we don't fix a broken system.
Exactly right. Because one of the issues with prevent for me as well is that it's a completely voluntary business, right? So that if you don't wish to be sort of monitored by prevent, you don't have to be. If you say, actually, I don't fancy that, I'm going to opt out of that, and if you don't opt in, then you're no longer part of it.
But that's just shocking in itself. It shouldn't be a do I want to be monitored or not? Of course, people aren't going to be monitored. Want to be monitored. But again, where I go back to the systemic failings, and I'm sorry, Mike, to go off piece, but actually, if we think about take registered sex offenders, they themselves can apply to come off of the monitoring as being a sex offender. So what hope have we got for other parts in relation to monitoring? We need to have robust training to understand thresholds, to actually when somebody's going to be a risk as well, and there needs to be not just a look into what happened here, but actually wider in context. Why can one decide not to be monitored? If they are deemed by a professional to be a risk, that decision should be taken out of their hands, and it should actually be an automatic, we are going to monitor you because we do deem you to be a risk.
Yes, exactly right. And I don't think there could be in any doubt that this individual who carried out those awful killings in Southport was much, much more than a risk. You know, he was actively acting out and telling people that he wanted to kill. I mean, you know, how much more do you need?
Absolutely. There aren't actually any words that we can even use to describe what happened. What we need now is action. We need action following on what's happened, not an inquiry that's going to have a 2-3 year inquiry and we sit back and we wait to read the inquiry. We all say, well, we can implement this. We don't have funding to implement that. Funding should not stop people being kept alive and safeguarding vulnerable individuals. If it's a funding requirement, we need to put funding into keeping people safe. That's the bottom line. And actually, but what we can't do is drag out this process. We need action now.
Absolutely right. Couldn't agree more. Emily, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Emily Constantas, Global CEO of the Safeguarding Alliance. I got this from Sonia. No knives should be available online. The retail company I work for has cards on hooks which you have to take to the tills. Then we get knives only after ID is shown, and we use our judgment based on training. These monsters get them online because they want a specific knife, maybe one they have seen or been told to get. Yeah, but, you know, we've got shoplifting now going on at such a rate that what would be stopping somebody from just, you know, shoplifting a knife or shoplifting a corkscrew or shoplifting some kind of implement which could be turned into a killing device. You know, you could go and buy a screwdriver in B&Q and kill somebody with that. But, you know, I don't think you have to be registered. I remember doing a story about this ages ago where I wanted to buy either a knife or a pair of scissors or something from a supermarket. It was with my son, and I went in and they asked me for ID, and so I showed them the ID, they gave me the knife. I then went to B&Q and bought an axe, which I didn't need any ID for. So, I mean, what are you talking about here? 0344 499 1000. I should say I was using it to chop wood, by the way, in case you're wondering. This from Paul in Fife. Mike, morning. Like many other British people, I've been buoyed by Donald Trump's victory, his inauguration and his executive orders, all of which aim to deliver what he promised in his campaign. Unlike Starmer, who is trying to break the record for broken promises. You can imagine my disappointment then when I read that Trump is now saying Starmer is doing a great job. What's going on? Well, I think he's just messing with his head, honestly. I think Trump is a very smart guy. It's the art of the deal, isn't it? He's pretending now that he likes Starmer, so Starmer will come to him like a little mouse, and then he'll sort of bat him about for a bit, and then he'll turn on him again. That's called management. That's called making somebody worry about what you're going to do next. Unpredictable. That's what Trump is. You know, he's no friend of Keir Starmer's. He remembers what Starmer said, but Starmer will jump to his tune whenever he calls him to do so. It's that simple. It's 8:48. Coming up, we're going to talk about GPs. We're going to talk about stress and mental illness as well. Is it all made up? This is Talk.
Farmers across Britain staged a defiant show of unity yesterday to make it clear to Rachel Reeves they will not let her decimate their futures without a fight. Tractors rolled into towns and villages to talk about the devastating inheritance tax changes that are happening to farms. There seems to be this enormous dichotomy between what the reality is, or what the farmers are saying, and what the government is saying, the number of farms that are actually going to be implicated in all of this. And they delivered a petition to number 10 Downing Street, signed by 250,000, a quarter of a million people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Your call is very important to us. Please stay on the line and you'll be transferred to the next available agent.
Hello, is this the White House? I used to have that number guaranteed written in my head. 456, I think it was. 202 for the area code. 456 1212, I think it was. I don't know. I used to always remember phone numbers. Now I don't remember any of them because I don't have them anymore. They're all just in my phone. This from somebody saying, oh, Vicky, my apologies. Great show as usual. Please hold the line. Donald will be with you shortly. Your call is important to us. You are in position 62. Your call is important to us. You are in position 61. Your call is important to us. You are in position 60. Your call is important to us. You are in position 59. If you would like to hold your position in the line, please press 1 or press 2 to carry on holding. 45 minutes go by. Two-tier key is finally number 1 in line, and then the line goes dead. Yeah, I mean, it could have happened like that. 45-minute call. Yeah, pull the other one. Let's see. Let's talk now to Dr. Dean Eggett, our favourite GP. He's up in Doncaster, the local medical committee there. And of course, it is once again a January crisis for the NHS. The front page of the I newspaper this morning has got a story basically saying they've got new plans. Wes Streeting has got a new plan. A&E patients may be treated at home. I don't know how this is going to work, Dean. I don't know about you. I mean, they can't treat people in the A&E, never mind sending people to their house to treat them. How's that going to happen? Morning.
It's just good morning, Mike. It's a strange one, isn't it? Here we are again at this annual NHS crisis, and hospitals are full. We know that there are no beds, there are no staff there. So there's been this idea now, actually over the past couple of years, of this project called Hospital at Home, where instead of having a patient in a hospital bed, you leave them at home and staff go out and see them in the community. Right. So in theory, don't buy hospital beds anymore, keep patients at home and send staff out to them. I think that's the plan. But I've never heard the concept of treating people with accidents and emergencies at home. I'll be interested to see how that one works.
Well, exactly right. I mean, because the last information we were given was that if you do have an emergency, the best thing to do is to get yourself to the A&E. Don't call for an ambulance. Now they're going to say, actually, don't bother going to the A&E, just stay where you are. They're also talking about setting up respiratory hubs for chest infections and asthma. And all of this sounds great on paper, but the trouble is, at the end of the day, you need the people to do it, and that's what we keep being told we don't have.
You do, that's entirely right. So I think the government need to move away from talking about hospitals and hospital beds and start talking about staff and workforce, because we have these respiratory hubs already, but what we don't have is an increased number of doctors and nurses and people to staff it, just as you say, Mike. So whether the patient is at home, whether they're in a hub, whether they're in hospital, it's not just the bricks and mortar and beds that we need, it's actually staff to look after patients, and that's what we just don't have at the moment.
Yeah, exactly right. And let me ask you about this other story that popped up over the weekend. It's a study that's been done for the Centre for Social Justice, a think tank, where they say that 4 out of 5 GPs are worried that the stresses and strains of everyday life are being too readily labelled as mental disorders. And actually, they're just everyday stresses and strains for people that they've become less resilient about.
Yeah, it's a tricky story, this one, isn't it? Because depression, anxiety and other sorts of mental disorders or mental poor health actually do really come from life. Yeah. You know, it's not as though one day you wake up and suddenly the chemistry of your brain is abnormal. Although that does happen, that's actually quite rare. Usually people with poor mental health is because of their socio-economic circumstances. Poor housing, poor income, being female, and being a young person, all of these things are known risk factors for poor mental health. So since COVID, the economy has taken a nosedive. The country is in freefall. Are we surprised that there are more people with poor mental health? Well, I'm certainly not. I guess the problem is, how do we treat it? Because giving you a pill is not going to change how much money you have in your household. It's not going to change your background. So what we really need to do is look to find out how we can improve people's mental health by improving society as a whole.
Yeah, but also we've seen an increase in people taking time off for stress, right? Which technically speaking would, I presume, come under the umbrella of mental health. I think we had a story in the Times a couple of weeks ago saying that I think a third of young people between the ages of 18 and 24 have taken time off with stress in the past 12 months. And I wonder if it's just because it's easier to do now than it used to be. I mean, when I was in my 20s, you wouldn't ring up the office and say, I'm suffering from stress. And I know that people will say, yeah, well, you're just an old dinosaur. Of course you wouldn't do that, but maybe that's why you're now mad. You know, but the point is that I just wouldn't do it. Whereas the culture now is that nobody bats an eyelid if somebody goes, oh, you know, I'm not feeling too good. I think I'll just have a duvet day. And in fact, I just don't think I'll come in Monday to Friday at all.
there's definitely a blend of that, isn't there? So there is this probably, I should say, healthier, I think, approach to work-life balance, where we're not going to kill ourselves to be at work anymore. And if we are unwell, we'll actually take the time off. We should probably celebrate that as a good thing. I think there are some people who will take that to an extreme, but largely we shouldn't kill ourselves to work. But at the same time, we have this constant drive for a growing economy. And over the years, work has just got harder and harder and harder. So what you can't have is people working at 100% all of the time, because they will collapse and fail. It's fine for us to put complete effort in for a week or two, but you can't do it all the time. So we have this unhealthy country where we're driving for economic growth. And we have a cohort of younger people now saying, well, actually, I'm not going to kill myself for work, quite rightly so. But what we don't have is a solution to mix that, to younger people not wanting to kill themselves, but a workplace wanting to kill you for extreme growth. We need to have that as a genuine conversation. How can we grow as an economy without killing our young people?
Sure, but I mean, there is lots between killing yourself for work, working hard, and, you know, doing absolutely nothing and just staying in bed because you don't fancy getting up, you know?
Yeah, but I'd like to think that they're a minority of people. Let's be honest, they do exist. So there's a minority of people who don't want to work, don't want to contribute to the economy, and do just phone in and say, it's not for me, I'm going to take a duvet day. I'd like to think that they're a minority, and we should spend some time looking at those and trying to get them back to work. But we probably shouldn't, or we should not, label the rest of society who actually just have a terrible time with this economic growth. We can't just say that they're lazy, and we don't want to flog them. We want to look after them so that they stay strong, they stay healthy, and they continue to contribute to the economy.
Well, many of them haven't. Yeah, well, that's the trouble. Many of them haven't contributed at all yet, and yet they want to be looked after by it, and that's the other problem. But we'll talk some more. Dr. Dean Eggett, thank you very much indeed, GP and CEO of Doncaster's local medical committee. Andy in Cleethorpes says, mental illness, it's all in the head. I mean, look, there's plenty of people that suffer from mental illness, there's no question about that, and certainly I wouldn't be somebody saying it doesn't exist, but, you know, people are stressed out. You know, so they don't necessarily suffer from any kind of illness. They're stressed out. Deal with it. And I think there are many ways of doing it. Staying at home on your own, looking at your knees, isn't the answer. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory, 2 minutes past 9. I'm Mike Graham. We are in the final hour of the show. We've been here for 3 glorious hours. We've got one more to go every single weekday morning, Monday to Friday. You don't want to miss a single second of it. This is the home of common sense. It's where the nation comes to talk. It is, of course, Morning Glory. Isabel Oakeshot's with us, Talk's international editor. We'll be talking to her about a great many things, including a question which we will pose to you right now. Is Britain going bankrupt? That's the question we're going to be asking, because, quite frankly, there's an awful lot of indicators that would suggest that all is not well with our economy. It's shrinking, it's not growing. Rachel Reeves keeps trying to tell us that it's growing, and she keeps talking about how she has completely and utterly stopped the decline that the Tories were lording it over, economically speaking, and that she's drawn a line under the years of shrinking of the economy. And it's now, well, it's not growing, is it? It's as simple as that. She was on TV over the weekend talking about how she was going to make the economy grow, but it still hasn't happened, and it still isn't happening. Meanwhile, we've got 4 million people facing a monster hike in their council tax, which could be as high as 25% in places like Windsor, all right, because all of the economics of the council model seem to be failing. There is hardly any council in this country that is performing properly monetarily, and many of them are already going bankrupt. We've got business confidence at an all-time low. We've got people saying that taxes are going to kill family businesses. That's Sir James Dyson saying that this morning in the Times. We've also got the CBI talking about absolutely and utterly devastating results from all the taxes that are being put on, and it just doesn't stop. Luckily, though, we've managed to get a call through to the President of the United States. I think we're just going to be put on hold for a minute.
Hello. Please hold for the President of the United States. Please hold for the President of the United States. Please hold for the President of the United States.
We are fixing the foundations. We're just on hold while we're fixing them. We'll be speaking to President Trump soon. 45 minutes, and we're told they had a conversation for. I'm suggesting to you that that might be slightly over-egging the pudding. Dan Hodges asked the question earlier, why would they lie? Really? They do that all the time. Anyway, 0344 499 1000 is the number. You know what to do. We've got Samantha here. Mike, you've done it again. You've let Dr. Egg it off again. Why wasn't mental health issues thrown through the roof in the 1940s and 50s when those people had real stress to deal with? i.e. worrying about World War I or World War II. Well, I think you'll find they did have quite a few issues, actually. I mean, have you not heard of the people who came back from World War I who suffered basically from all manner of mental illness and all manner of, you know, what they used to call PTSD? They didn't really know it as that. But, yeah, I mean, there was. And I didn't let them off the hook at all. We had a very good conversation about it. It's what we do right here at Morning Glory. It's 5 minutes past 9. Let's get it on.
Please hold for the President of the United States. Please hold for the President of the United States. Please hold for the President of the United States.
Donald Trump, by the way, has been in for a week. He's already made Colombia a U-turn on their threat to turn back planes full of Colombian migrants. He's already sorted out the fire department in LA. He's already sorted out a £600 billion investment from Saudi Arabia. He's already sorting out the problems in the Middle East with Hamas. He's about to sort out the business with Ukraine. I mean, this guy never stops working, and he's very successful. Let's talk to Isabel Oakeshott, who is, of course, Talk's international editor. Isabel, very good morning to you.
Morning. So do you think the 45 minutes that Sir Keir was supposedly on the phone to the White House, do you think that 40 of those was on hold?
I suspect that may well be the case, because they can technically then say, well, it was a 45-minute call. How much of the speaking? I mean, the readout from the White House is even shorter than the one from Downing Street. It doesn't appear to me to look like a conversation that took 45 minutes to have.
I just can't imagine, anyway, Trump putting up with 45 minutes with Keir Starmer. I mean, even sort of 10 minutes is enough to make the most patient person kind of switch off somewhat. So I can't see Trump actually having the time in his diary to listen to that guy droning on and on. You were showing some pictures earlier of him, of the Prime Minister with Rachel Reeves and I think Ed Miliband, a bunch of others. For the benefit of those who didn't see the pictures, our government, our cabinet, they basically look like a bunch of G4S guys doing a tour of a warehouse or something, being shown, right, this is where you need to watch out for the security in that corner and that corner. I mean, does that look like a government to you?
It really doesn't, does it? It looks like some people waiting around backstage for a Taylor Swift concert, perhaps.
It's something like that. Yeah, they're basically the security guys at an Amazon warehouse or something.
Oh, I know. I mean, and continually we get this kind of nonsense. I mean, we've got a load of clips. I'm not even sure if I want to play them, to be honest, about Rachel Reeves from accounts talking at the weekend. I'll play you one where she's talking about the pan-Euro Mediterranean deal, I think, to Trevor Phillips.
Well, it was really interesting to see Maroš Šefčovič this week suggest that Britain might be welcome.
The EU Trade Commissioner.
Yeah, the UK might be welcome in that pan-European and Mediterranean customs framework.
Customs framework are fixing the foundations. They're sort of morphing into one person, though, aren't they? Rachel Starmer.
Oh, God, don't do that to me. When people talk about pan anything, all I can think of is like pan fried chicken or something.
Yes.
It just lose my concentration.
I know. It is awful, but let's talk about something that you raised earlier about the state of the nation, the state of the nation's finances and the terrible mess that we appear to be in. Because no matter how many times Rachel Reeves talks about growth, there isn't any, right? It's not happening.
I mean, the big question to me today is Britain going bankrupt? You know, I wake up and see ghastly headlines yet again in the newspapers, this time about how an awful lot of people in our country are facing huge hikes to their council tax bills. Not 3 or 4 or 5%, which is bad enough. You know, we're already clobbered to a huge degree on council tax for questionable services, you know, rubbish that only gets collected every 2 weeks. And if you happen to miss the crucial moment, then your bins will sit there for another 2 weeks. Yeah. Now it seems that there's a string of councils that are so close to going under, they are literally going bust, that they're using a special provision that enables them to hike council tax by up to 25%. And just to repeat that, they are doing this because they are going bust. And I think that is a symbol of what is happening across the country. Basically, the state has got so unwieldy, it's got so huge, it is paying out to do so many things for so many people, many of whom bluntly shouldn't be here. We saw at the weekend 1 in 12 Londoners is an illegal immigrant. It has huge cost implications that we as a country are literally on the verge of going bankrupt. And there is evidence of that every single day. So far from growth, what we've got is, at the very best, a kind of stagnant situation. And remember that a lot of the changes that Rachel Reeves announced in her catastrophic budget last year haven't even come into effect yet.
No, exactly. It's going to get even worse. And that is really the problem, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, we cannot continue to keep paying for things that we can't afford. I mean, we keep being now told this morning in the Times that, oh, we can't possibly raise the amount of money we put into our defence because at the end of the day, we haven't got any money, you know?
Well, I mean, we've got money. It's just how we're choosing to allocate it. And it's being allocated in all the wrong ways. You know, we're continuing to throw vast sums of money at an NHS that is quite evidently broken, as a shocking account in one of today's papers it's an anonymous diary by an A&E doctor of the scenes of devastation where he works, including a mother who couldn't speak any English, coming in carrying a dead child in her hands. You know, is this what Britain has become? It's literally like something out of the third world, and yet, you know, Labour still seem to think that the one way they can perhaps stagger back to some level of popularity is by terrifying voters that under any other party, the NHS would be written off. Well, maybe it's time that actually we did contemplate a different system to deliver care that people can actually be proud of.
Well, exactly right. And this morning we've got yet more ideas on that from West Streeting, saying, oh, don't worry, we're going to move A&E out of A&E and we're actually going to come to your house instead. Well, that's never going to happen because we haven't got enough people to do it in the A&E. So how on earth are they going to find people outside of it? But let's go back to councils for a minute. The way that they're run is so bad, I don't think even any of us have a clue about how badly run they are. I bet you they all own loads and loads of loans that they're paying back money on, that they've taken out for years and years and years. We know that an awful lot of the council tax money now goes on gold-plated pensions and salaries. We also know that social care is costing them an absolute fortune. You know, the whole model is wrong, basically.
Completely, and I think many people do have a pretty good idea of how appallingly councils are run, because they'll have had interactions with their council, whatever it might be about, whether it's they're trying to add an extra tiny little bit of an extension to their house, or they want to put an extra window in, or is it that they're not getting their bins collected, whatever it may be. And they just find that it's just a woeful service. I mean, I was trying to rent a tiny little storage unit from a council, and they had approached me saying, we've got this unit for rent, would you like to put in an offer? Just never heard from them again. Right. I mean, I could have raised my offer. I would have happily maybe paid a bit more for it, but they're just not operating in any kind of business-like fashion. And as you say, the burden on councils of the immigration crisis is absolutely immense, and that I think is very little understood by voters. It's not talked about. We talk about it on a national basis, but at council level, having to look after all these people who are basically totally dependent on the local authority, whether it's for a roof over their head or all manner of other services, is breaking Britain.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I told you this story before, but I have mentioned it on online before, or on the air before, I should say. And this was told to me by a border force person, right, who said that this is a typical scene every single day, somewhere like Heathrow Airport. 3 women had come from Nigeria. They all had working visas to be nurses in the NHS, right? Along with them, they each had a husband and 5 children. So basically there was 21 of them coming into the country for 3 NHS jobs, none of which would be paying probably more than about £28,000. How can that possibly be economically viable?
It isn't economically viable. And I mean, these are shocking illustrations of a policy and an approach to NHS recruitment and immigration in general, which tell you everything you need to know about why the country is collapsing. And we saw that actually in the last set of immigration figures. It's not, this isn't just anecdotal. Those figures showed that people who are coming in on work permits are bringing far more dependents than they are actually, or even student visas are bringing dependents, which means that overall they are not net benefits to the economy. It's just not sustainable, and yet it's carried on, and here we are where we are. All of this has just got to stop. We need a Trump-like approach to it, where an incoming government says this stops today. It stops the moment we take power. End of. Yeah. We're not having any more coming in on student visas, bringing their dependents. You're either a student or you're an earner, and you're earning a threshold on which you can support a dependent. You can't be both of those things.
Exactly right. And just looking at the Telegraph this morning, there's a piece in their business pages about fears of a recession growing because the CBI say that basically job cuts are coming. Bosses in the private sector are expecting a significant fall in activity over the next 3 months. You've got Charles Tyrwhitt, the founder of that shirt and clothing manufacturer, basically saying, I won't invest in Britain right now. Labour's policies are anti-business. Sir James Dyson, another great entrepreneur, saying that, Rachel Reeves' policies are going to wreck family businesses, millions and millions of pounds worth of potential government revenue is just going to disappear and vanish.
It will disappear, and we've only got a short time to stop that happening. And actually, we do see signs of Rachel from accounts getting a little bit twitchy in a number of her things. So she's rowing back a bit on certain things, and now starting to talk about the third runway, possibility of reviving that whole scheme to build another runway at Heathrow. Clearly, that's an effort to just sort of show some levels of activity, create some jobs, but it's going to cause an absolute almighty clash within the cabinet and all those green nutters who just can't get their head around building anything, and certainly not if it has the word aviation in it.
Well, this is the thing. Although, who knows? I mean, it's somebody who thinks that basically by putting in a third runner at Heathrow, the air around London is going to get cleaner. I'm not sure she's basing her ideas on any kind of science that you and I have heard of. And she was completely stumped, by the way, when she started telling Laura Kuenssberg, don't worry, it's not going to be polluting the country because we're going to be using biodiverse fuel. To which Laura Kuenssberg said, well, why, when they can make that stuff in Grangemouth up in Scotland, are you allowing it to be shut down? She didn't have an answer.
Oh dear, it's so depressing, isn't it? It really is. Have we got anything cheerful to talk about this morning?
I have actually, yeah. Apparently half of Generation Z, Gen Z if you like, wants to be ruled by a dictator. I think that tells you all you need to know about how people have been raised in this country. So there's hope for us yet, because I'm going to make a bid for it, I think. I'm going to go to talk to all the Gen Z people in the office here, and I'll say, right, I'm going to, from this point on, be your dictator. You will bow to my will and you'll like it.
Well, that was what the Independent Republic of Mike Graham was always about,
Exactly.
wasn't it?
Exactly.
I always thought there was a real market for it, actually. I mean, people like being told what to do. We saw that during the pandemic, and they especially like being told what to do if actually the person doing the bossing around has the right ideas and is going to create a high-functioning country. So I'm definitely up for voting for you, Mike.
There is actually, I mean, psychologically, there is a lot of truth to it, because most people actually would rather be told what to do. I mean, look at what happened during COVID. The numbers of people who actually were more than happy to go, oh, I can't do that anymore because they've told me I can't do it. As opposed to the likes of you and I who went, actually, if somebody tells me not to do something, I'm definitely doing it. You know, but the numbers of people, the sheer numbers in this country, probably 90% of people who didn't bother leaving the house, who did exactly what they were told, who went and stood in a supermarket line and metered behind the person in front of them and made sure they wore gloves and a mask. And, you know, I mean, they want to be told how to do it.
They absolutely do. I have to say, it brought out, a side of my personality that has obviously been latent and has probably always been there. But it was an absolute pushback against being told what to do. I go the opposite way. Yeah. I suspect pretty much everybody who works for Talk is like that. You know, we question things. We don't assume that those telling us what to do are smarter than we are or have the right answers. And guess what? We were right about that, weren't we?
Well, we were. And see, the CIA is now coming out and said that basically they're pretty sure that COVID actually came from a lab leak in China. And I wonder where all the lefties are going to be when they start asking for reparations from China for wrecking our economy.
Well, they will be absolutely nowhere to be seen. They won't want that conversation at all. In fact, I've publicly talked about this, and all the lefties start squealing and saying it's a ridiculous thing to ask for. It's not ridiculous at all, actually. And in fact, we've known, I mean, I think on the American intelligence side, they've actually known for quite a few years now that it did come from the lab in China. Just far too much of a coincidence that they just so happened to be, fiddling around making very special types of perfume in that COVID-y lab, just near where the outbreak first began. I don't know. Does that feel like a coincidence to you?
Yeah.
Not.
You don't really need Inspector Clouseau on the case for that one, do you, really? Isabel, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Isabel Oakeshott Talks international editor there. We've got a little treat for you now. This is the government, which is now ruling Great Britain, and some of the really, really important things that they've been saying lately. Here's one from Carol in Birmingham. Mike, if GPs went back to work, it may reduce the number of patients needing to go to hospital, thereby helping out their hospital colleagues. A very good point. Yeah, I think there's still some kind of work to rule, aren't they? And Martin in Oswestry, anyone with the gift of sight can see smug Rachel from accounts is ruining this country. She is. I'm worried now, having come up with that idea that somebody's going to put together the two images. Rachel Reeves and Keir Starmer are morphing into one person. Fixing the foundations, Heathrow runway, you know what I mean? It sounds right, doesn't it? This is Talk.
Please hold for the President of the United States.
Labour want to reorganise the structure of local government. That has been used by county councils in which the Conservatives are in control to say, oh, well, if there are changes coming, let's suspend the elections. And guess what? The councils that have asked for suspensions of the elections are the ones in which reform is the strongest. And it looks like up to 10 million people who should have voted, 4 years after their last vote for their county councillors will be denied the vote for a year, maybe 2 years, maybe longer. I mean, I thought only dictators cancel elections.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. I'm Mike Graham. This, of course, is the place to be. It's the home of common sense. Why would you want to be anywhere else? It's the revolution of common sense. It's the year of common sense, as denoted by the new President of the United States of America. And boy, is he getting to work and getting some things done. He's had a phone call with Keir Starmer, finally, after nearly a week of being president. He's also managed to completely get Colombia to button down and go with their view that they're going to deport a load of migrants into Colombia. Yesterday afternoon, the Americans got a phone call from the president of Colombia saying, no, we're not having that. We're going to turn the planes back. To which the president, who happened to be on the golf course at the time, said, oh, really? Well, if you do that and those planes come back here, I will consider that a breach of national security and I will put 25% tariffs on everything you send us from Colombia. We might even withhold some financial aid internationally. And within 45 minutes, he only took 2 holes, from the 6th hole to the 8th hole. Suddenly, it was all reversed. Why can we not get someone like that? Anne Widdecombe's here, former Home Office Minister, of course. Anne, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
Isn't it pleasurable to see a leader actually working in the job that he's in, 7 days a week, not stopping for anything, getting an awful lot done that he said he would get done?
Well, that's probably why young people now are, inclined towards dictatorship. Of course, what they actually mean is, first of all, a benign dictatorship, and secondly, an elective dictatorship, so that the country decides where it will be. But then, of course, what you get is decisive action.
Yes.
And you make a manifesto pledge, and you can actually put it into action in very quick time. Whereas we have here a lot of very bureaucratic processes, which mean that even when you want to do something, even if you start to do it, it's going to take a very long time.
Right. And, of course, when it comes to getting rid of migrants who are unwanted, we have the ECHR to deal with. We've got Giorgia Meloni apparently trying to, today in Italy, deport a load of people and try and get around the ECHR. We, on the other hand, seemingly are allowing more and more people in. Figures from the Home Office show more than 50 relatives of refugees have been allowed to join them in Britain every single day. Of the most recent sort of few weeks and months. So the numbers have now more than trebled to 19,154 in a year. These are all people who are family members of asylum seekers, many of whom have come here on small boats from Syria, Sudan, Eritrea, Afghanistan, Iran. I mean, this is ridiculous, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, you've got to draw a very, very clear distinction, and this is why Reform said in the last general election that it wouldn't be normal to have families accompanying immigrants. We have to distinguish here between asylum seekers who have not been granted asylum, who have not been recognised as refugees, who may well have come here completely illegally and should go straight back. We have to distinguish between those bringing in relatives and people who have been, and they're a minority, accepted as genuine refugees, also trying to bring in immediate family who may be in equal danger. But in general, no, if you give a visa, you give it to one person.
But these are people who have come here, many of them have come here on the small boats, many of them have come here illegally, they've sought asylum and they've been granted asylum, but they don't have to meet any basic language skills in terms of speaking English, they don't have to show that they can support themselves, and they are able to access the NHS for free. So, I mean, it's a recipe for disaster, isn't it? I mean, it might be very nice for us to do it, but I think we're past that point now, aren't we?
No, listen. Nobody who comes from a safe country should be able to claim asylum. That is why Reform have said if you arrive here on a small boat from France, of all places, automatically your claim is refused.
Yes.
There is a very small core of genuine asylum seekers who do not come from safe countries, who get into this country by extraordinary routes, not through other safe countries. Now, you know, there is a distinction between the two, and we're not making that distinction. And nobody who comes in on a small boat from France should ever be granted asylum because, you know, to put it bluntly, they've come from a perfectly safe country.
Also, the more that we grant asylum to those people, the more likely more people will come on that route to get asylum, knowing that they'll be able to get it.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, that is why we should automatically say anybody who comes in on a small boat is refused asylum before they even ask for it.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Meanwhile, we've got loads of other cases that we could talk to you about all day, but I'm just going to pick one out. This is today's madness of the day, if you like. Violent drug dealer dodged deportation because his daughter might be transgender. It says here, the dad of 3, granted anonymity by the courts, don't you know, was convicted of dealing crack and heroin. He's 48 years old, he's from Jamaica, but he's allowed to stay in this country under European human rights laws, despite the fact that he's been jailed multiple times. 5 different spells in prison he's had since he was living here since 1991. Isn't that marvellous?
Well, can you imagine Trump putting up with that?
No.
You know, can you imagine anybody who's got any sense at all putting up with that?
No. Well, in fact, I've seen... I saw J.D. Vance talking at the weekend, saying if somebody has committed a crime in my country and he's from another country, I don't want him in my country and we're going to kick him out. And I mean, that should be the rule.
Well, certainly where anybody's committed a crime serious enough to go to prison, I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about it at all.
Right.
I'm not about somebody who's parked on a double yellow line, but somebody who's committed an actual crime and has been sentenced to prison and has used the resources of the state in prison,
yes,
that person should have to go back to their own country.
Yeah. And the rules say that they should be sent back, but of course we've got these loopholes with the Human Rights Act and the human rights lawyers who say that his right to a family life outweighs the right to be deported by the state. Well, I think it's time we change that.
Parliament makes the law. Parliament should make the law. No international body should be able to tell us what to do. And we can come out of ECHR, and that is what we should be doing. And then we can interpret the law as we decide.
I mean, you would think it was straightforward, wouldn't you? You would think that that was common sense, Anne. You would think that those of us who have common sense would be able to dictate to those who clearly don't have it. But you do wonder. I've got another story here for you in the Telegraph, front page of the Telegraph. Police officers have been told not to use the terms black sheep or blacklisted, and you can't say a pregnant woman either. This is a 9-page document given to staff at the Bedfordshire Police and Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire Constabularies. It's a 2023 diversity guide which has been retreaded and updated for 2025.
And that is exactly why Reform say that our first action in government will be to get rid of every single equality, diversity and inclusion post in the public sector. The police are moaning that they have no money. They're moaning that they can't monitor things like shoplifting. They're complaining they haven't got enough personnel. And then they're spending time and resources issuing that sort of junk. Now, you know, come on.
It is incredible. The reference resource for staff and officers describes gender as a social construct relating to behaviours and attributes. It says there is a wider range of gender identities than just male and female.
Well, it's a complete nonsense. There are 2 genders. There are 2 genders. And, you know, we may teach our children in schools that there are 72 genders, but actually they'll only ever encounter 2.
I mean, again, not difficult, this, is it? I mean, and you know, the trouble is you're never going to get Starmer to do it. Donald Trump has done it. He said it in his inauguration speech. There are only 2 genders, to a massive great cheer. You know, I don't understand why we have to suffer under the yoke of this nonsense.
Well, we have to suffer it because we elected a Labour government.
Very true. If only we could unelect them, that would be great. Anne, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Anne Winnicombe talking perfect sense here. One from Francis in Llanelli. She says, morning, Mike. A 45-minute call is very different to a 45-minute discussion. And John says, morning, Mike. John from Chorley. When we were younger, we were too busy working to pay the bills to get stressed out. Great show as usual. Well, exactly right. The only reason it lasted 45 minutes, says Richard, and we're talking about the Trump phone call, was because Trump kept falling asleep. Absolutely right. We'll play you, I think, a segment of what that call was all about. I think we might have it. Should we do that now? Okay. We'll do it after the break. Why not? It's 9:34.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:36. Julie Hartley-Brewer here just before 10 to let us know what's going on. We've got some fantastic clips of Donald Trump from the weekend because he did an awful lot of things, including sending a load of migrants back to Colombia, including talking to Keir Starmer, including visiting the fire victims in Los Angeles, including popping over to Las Vegas to have a little bit of a rally, including seeing some flood victims from North Carolina, including also managing to make a bunch of statements about what he was going to do with regard to Europe, with regard to the Middle East, with regard to as well the hostages and all the rest of it. I mean, the guy just doesn't stop working. It's amazing. Here's one from Nicola in Norfolk who says, Mike, Prime Minister's questions is a total waste of time these days. Questions never get an answer with our clueless Prime Minister going into full obfuscating lawyer mode, preferring to try and crack jokes or make sarcastic comments in order to deflect and misdirect. The Speaker needs to do more to make him answer properly, and if he can't do that, then maybe PMQs should be scrapped completely. Well, I think that's very good. I think they should just ask questions that have a yes or no answer. And then maybe he would have to answer them properly. Let's talk to Tony, who's in West Sussex, wants to talk about that Trump call. Tony, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. Great show. Love it, love it, love it.
Yeah, what can I do for you, sir?
If he was on the phone for 45 minutes to Trump, yes, was Mandelson discussed? And is Mandelson going to be the ambassador to Washington? And I would have thought that if Trump had said, yes, it's okay, you can send him over here, we'd have heard about it by now. So either it wasn't discussed, so what's the point of the bloody call? But if it was discussed and Trump said, no, we've not heard anything. I mean, I wouldn't have Mandelson anywhere near me, never mind in this country, but unfortunately we have to.
And he's not supposed to be too popular with the Trump administration. No. Well, according to what they're calling the readout, right, which I've got in front of me, in addition to the Gaza conversation they had in the Middle East, they also discussed trade and the economy, with the Prime Minister setting out how we are deregulating to boost growth. I don't know where he's doing that. And then it says the two leaders stressed the importance of the close and warm ties between the UK and the US, and the President spoke of his respect and affection for the royal family. That's not a 45-minute conversation, is it?
It's not a 45-minute. Not only that, Mandelson was not discussed, which makes me worry that Starmer hasn't got the balls to ask him. And if he had, I think Trump would have said, sorry, anybody else but Mandelson.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I don't think you'd be too keen on David Miliband either, though, who seems to be throwing his name into the frame as well.
They're all jerks. They're all jerks.
I mean, they're all ex-Blair government ministers, and I mean, you know, why would they want to favour him?
No, they wouldn't. No. It just worries me that we're being fed lies.
Yeah, it's a very good point. A very good point. Very well made, Tony. Thank you very much indeed. Tony says this, a different Tony. Henry Kissinger said it's dangerous to be an enemy of America, but fatal to be a friend. Very interesting. Let's have a look at what Trump was getting up to at the weekend, because I've said this before many times. There may or may not be a special relationship between Keir Starmer and Donald Trump. But I'll tell you what, if Donald Trump doesn't work out as a great president, which I think he will personally, I think he's got a future on the comedy circuit. Here he is talking about Joe Biden tripping up the stairs on Air Force One.
And I walked up the stairs of that massive plane that's waiting for me, that big 747, and I said, there's no way I'm going to let myself fall, because that was one hell of a... That triple fall was a disaster. I would call that a political disaster. You can fall once, you can fall twice, but you can't fall 3 times. You can't fall 3 times. What a disaster. I've used that in every ad I think I ever did.
I mean, he really does have the gift of the timing of talking as well, doesn't he? Let's have another look. This is something else he did about Joe Biden, forgetting to call people back. I mean, this one's even better.
Our country was on the verge of some of the very bad things, and bad things were happening. And now there's light not only over America. I've heard it from even our enemies. They call up and they say, sir, we hate you. We do hate you, but there's light over the world right now. They hate me. Some of them hate me. If they liked me, you got a problem, right? They like Sleepy Joe. What's not to like? You know, they'd call up. It's funny. I was told today by one of the big leaders of the world, would call for a telephone call with the President of the United States a year ago. And they'd say, we'd like to speak with, who is this? It's the head of Germany, the head of, name it, the head of France, the name of any country, it didn't matter. He would never pick up the call. They'd say, he'll call you back in 2 months. 2 months. He has a schedule. He's extremely busy sleeping. You know, Macron of France, he'll call you back in 2 months. So 2 months comes along and there's no call. They'd say, he didn't call. The stories are, I mean, these stories are not very exaggerated. I want to tell you, they're a little bit for laughter, but, you know, it's only for laughter. The fake news will say, oh, he exaggerated. It was only 1 month, you know.
It's very funny, isn't he? I mean, he's just having a ball, having a great time. Absolutely incredible. Remarkable stuff. Absolutely right. We're going to have a little listen now to a call, because it was a 45-minute call. I'm sort of turning into Trump here. You know, you feel like you want to just make fun of everything. 45-minute call between Donald Trump, the president, 47th president of the United States, and, of course, Sir Keir Starmer. There he is on the phone to the president. 45 minutes of this. What do you reckon?
Hello. Please hold for the President of the United States. Please hold for the President of the United States.
Hello, is this Two-Tier Keir? Hey! Don here. I'm hearing rumors that you're locking people up for posting memes.
Yes, but because they are far-right thugs saying hurty words and upsetting...
Listen, I'm going to stick my foot far right up your...
You can't do that to me. My dad was a tool maker.
Well, he certainly made a tool for the World Economic Forum.
Don't you bring Davos into this. I'll tell my mummy.
Yes, well, my mom, who was probably the greatest mom there ever has been, came from Scotland. She always told me, Donnie, don't ever let those commie take over the home country.
That was the end Obviously, that was a spoof conversation for anybody stupid enough to think that it was real. I have to say these things just in case somebody complains. Obviously, it was a spoof conversation. One here from Malk in Surrey. Mike, Rachel will need a third runway to make it easier for everyone to leave the country. Absolutely right. And one here from Barry. Our trade deficit with France is 26 billion. Why don't we copy Trump and put tariffs on French imports until they stop the boats? Well, I mean, you could do that, couldn't you? You actually could. Keith in Durham says, Wes Streeting has lost the plot with his plans to treat A&E patients in their homes. I've never heard anything so stupid. Yeah, can you imagine? Yeah, don't ring up, right? Don't ring up because that'll make the phone lines too busy because you'll be holding up, very important people who need to be able to get through. Yeah, well, I need A&E, so therefore I'm quite an important person. Yeah, but don't use the phone. Don't call for an ambulance because, we haven't got any. And therefore, the best thing to do is to drive yourself to A&E. Unless, of course, you can't drive yourself to A&E, in which case we'll send somebody to you. I mean, does anybody know what's going on inside the NHS at all? The doctors seemingly don't know what's going on. I mean, for heaven's sake. Let's get a voice note from Nigel.
Good morning, Mike. It's Nigel here from Temple Fortune. I've just got some breaking news. I've heard that Sadiq Khan and indeed Ed Miliband have agreed to the third runway at Heathrow Airport to the delight of Rachel Reeves on the condition that planes are limited to 20 miles an hour only. If not, they will be captured and given a ticket on one of the ANPR speed cameras.
No doubt. They'll probably also have to pay a ULEZ fee, right, and a congestion charge, no doubt. I mean, unbelievable, right? Rachel Reeves seems to think that if you get more runways and more planes coming in, the air quality gets better. She's not very good at science, is she? She's an economist, after all, I think. That's the talk.
Government getting tough, you can't buy a knife unless you're 18, right? What about prevent? What about the fact this guy was referred 3 times to prevent? What about the fact he was found 10 times at school carrying a knife? What about the absolute failures of all the authorities, child services, prevent, the local police? What about those failures? And then they suppressed the truth for as long as they possibly could. And in fact, because of the guilty plea, there's a lot more would have come out in the court case, but that's by the by, perhaps for now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to Morning Glory. It's 9:48. Julie Hartley-Brewer will be here in about 10 minutes' time. And meanwhile, you can make a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. You can send us a voice note there as well. 87222 if you want to send us a text. Mark has done that. He says, Mike, I've been with my current employer for 23 years. In that time, I've had 4 days off for a broken leg, 1 day for norovirus and 1 day for vertigo. My employer, the current one, the government at the moment, gives 6 months off sick on full pay. And we currently have 10 to 15% of the workforce on a daily basis off sick. I wonder why. Well, this is one of the big problems in the NHS, that an awful lot of people are regularly off sick. Now, you might say that's hardly surprising if they're working on the front line of medicine, because obviously people will get diseases that they catch from the patients that are coming in. Yeah, I get all that. But there is apparently a very, very high level of absence in the NHS, and particularly in local councils as well, which both happen to be public sector employees. Kim in Belfast wants to have this to say. In some cases, the pain from mental health is real. It has a lot to do with people's past trauma, as the doctor was saying. There isn't the help out there, which is making matters worse. And one here from somebody who doesn't give a name saying, Mike, this mythical special relationship with the US that Starmer and all MPs talk about, does it involve Lammy calling Trump a fascist, Nazi, white supremacist abuser? Well, you do wonder whether or not that has been entirely forgotten by the 47th President of the United States of America. By the way, a bit of breaking news for you. This is a story that's just come across the desk. Labour donor Dale Vince, who only this weekend was calling for an end to all party donations, even though he gave £5 million to Labour and appears now to have done rather well out of a new deal for a solar farm. Not saying the two things are connected, that would be entirely wrong to suggest that. However, apparently he's suffering a bit, because we did talk to him the other day about how he'd given £40.5 million to his ex-wife, and he said he was very happy to do so. He's now lost another £12 million. Apparently he had a project that was based on vegan gas. No, not that kind of project. I don't know how you produce vegan gas, but I've got a pretty good idea. Apparently it involves grass, right? Apparently forcing grass into some kind of machine, which then produces gas. Well, apparently accounts for the energy tycoon's holding company, Green Britain Group, showed it fell to a £7 million loss in the year to April, compared to a profit before tax of last year of 50 million quid. So that's quite a big jump, unless, of course, the divorce money's come out. I don't know. That would be wrong as well. Green Britain Group is solely owned by Mr. Vince and contains his business interests, including Ecotricity, the energy supplier he founded in 1995. Now, apparently, there's a lab-grown diamond company called Sky Diamond, and he's also got Forest Green Rovers in there, a vegan football club. The group's slump into the red was partially triggered by a £12 million write-down on Ecotricity's green gas mill in Reading, which was opened in 2023. Apparently it suffered from engineering and design failures. In other words, it didn't work at all. What's wrong with it? It's completely knackered. So-called vegan gas is made using grass cuttings rather than animal waste, which is broken down by anaerobic digestion, to create methane. Right, I get that. He's championed the scheme, saying, we estimate that if we grow grass on all the marginal land in Britain, we'll be able to make enough green grass to supply the entire country. except it doesn't work. So, yeah, that's a bit like saying, look, I've got this machine, right? I'm going to put a load of water into it, and I'm going to put some grass into it, and it's going to grow enough grass and gas for the whole world. And people would go, you've gone mad, mate. Dale Vince manages to get grants for some of this stuff. I've got nothing against Dale. I think he's all right. And we had a very interesting conversation the other day. Revenues from selling electricity and gas came to 467 million during the year, which is a bit of a drop from the 551 million a year earlier, when revenues included, wait for it, and he says he doesn't get government subsidies, 123 million pounds worth of government subsidies, which was to help energy users through the crisis of the energy prices. Anyway, better luck next time, Dale, is all I can say. I'm sorry about all that. Maybe you could get some news from Rachel from accounts to see if you got any of that tax deductible. Let's have a look at what she's got to say to Trevor Phillips.
Does it hurt you to be described as Rachel from accounts?
Well, you know, I've probably been called worse things, Trevor, but I became an MP almost 15 years ago now. Before I became a Member of Parliament, I worked as an economist at the Bank of England, and then I worked in the private sector in financial services for Halifax Bank of Scotland. I'm proud of the jobs that I did before I became a Member of Parliament, but in the end, people are going to judge me on the job that I'm doing now, the job that I'm doing as Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yeah, it's not very good, is it? I'm going to judge you and say you're not doing a very good job. In fact, you're about as much use as that vegan gas that Dale Vince has been producing. How about getting a third runway at Heathrow? Because that's bound to be a good idea.
A third runway will mean that instead of circling London, flights can land at Heathrow. So a lot has changed in aviation, and sustainable aviation and economic growth go hand in hand. We're an open trading economy. We need to bring investment in, but I believe that clean energy, that reducing our carbon emissions are good for economic growth. We can do the two together.
There will be a third runway then. You've more or less just said that.
Well, we'll announce our plans in due course, but already we've signed off expansion at Stansted and City Airport.
Yeah, so a third runway, right? According to Simon Calder, who knows a thing or two about runways and airports, if you put a third runway into Heathrow, that means you'll have more planes. Now, she reckons if you have more planes, you will get less carbon emissions. I don't think she's got that right. She claims that there's going to be all this new kind of bio fuel, right? But she hasn't got any of that. Maybe you can buy it from the Dale Vince. Pound them with some non-existent vegan gas. It's not going to make the air cleaner, is it? Let's face it. Let's have a look at what she likes about the Beatles. Here she was talking to Laura Kunsberg again, Rachel Reeves, and, of course, accompanied by Kemi Badenoch, the head of the Tory party.
For reasons that will become clear, I wonder what your favourite Beatles song is, Rachel Reeves.
Well, I'm more of a Beyonce person myself, Laura, but Hey Jude, I enjoy that song.
And what about you? Are you a Beatles fan?
Yellow Submarine.
Yellow Submarine? Well, I'm sure there'll be very popular choices with the audience.
I mean, they both actually didn't get treated equally on that, because Kemi Badenoch got absolutely battered by people saying, oh, you're not really a Beatles fan if you think Yellow Submarine's the best Beatles song. But nobody said anything about Rachel Reeves going, well, I think I prefer Beyonce, really. Really? Hey Jude, apparently. Danny in West Yorkshire says this country cannot afford another 4 years of these two idiots. When Nigel Farage does become Prime Minister, he really will inherit an absolutely trashed economy. Forget what the Conservatives left Labour. Imagine the destruction these two are going to cause in 4 years. It's going to be catastrophic. I just hope Nigel will have the answers, although he will not be staffing billions or spending billions on net zero illegal immigrants, carbon capture and all the money they're sending to other countries in the name of climate change. The list is endless. The money is there, it's how you choose to allocate it. Well, we have got plenty of money in this country, but the trouble is an awful lot of the money that we have is being paid out because we've had to borrow so much money as well. And that's the other problem. Let's have a look at this. This is Kemi Badenoch talking to Trevor Phillips about why Britain and the UK needs a dominant culture.
One of the things that I don't think we have been doing in this country properly is having a proper immigration strategy. And many people assume that it's just something that government does. It has to go well beyond government. All of society has to do it. And that's what used to happen when we had immigration in much smaller, much more manageable numbers. And the numbers that we have seen over the last few decades mean that we are getting people having separate and insular communities. The most extreme example of this is what we saw with the rape gangs, where people who'd been coming to this country from the 60s, from a particular region and sub-community in Pakistan, get here, stay insular, not interested in integration, and then you start seeing very, very toxic, you know, I would say evil habits propagating, and no one doing anything about it because they're separate. We have to make sure that we have a dominant culture in our country, and the people who move here want to help make the UK a better place. Our country is not a hotel, it's not a dormitory, this is our home.
Yeah, it's not a hotel or a dormitory, it just feels like it. They're not a very good one. Johnny Lincolnshire says Boston Town Councils have just given themselves 49% pay rises. It's insane. That's on the story that 4 million people are going to have their council tax go up. Julie Hartley-Brewer's here. Very good morning to you. Is the country going bankrupt, was the question we were asking earlier.
I mean, it does feel that way, doesn't it? It really does. I have to say, I think Kemi Badenoch, which was saying yesterday, there's some really good solid stuff, and she was interesting. She kept picking up, of the people who are interviewing her going on about, like, you're always worried about the language people use.
I know.
Hurty words as opposed to talk about some facts.
Right.
I think she's saying a lot of good stuff. I just don't know if she's quite getting it.
Right.
If she's quite hitting the
I mean,
the right
I wonder
note
if
with
she's
the nation.
playing the Labour Party at their own game. She's drawing attention to things without saying what she would do, because that's kind of what
policies,
they did.
yeah.
Right.
Well, that's what's interesting. I mean, don't you think the most fascinating story of the weekend is Donald Trump basically saying to Colombia,
oh, yeah.
you won't accept deportation flights? Well, fine. Then 25% tariffs. In a week, it goes up to 50% tariffs. Oh, what a surprise! They decided to play along.
My favourite part of the story.
Well, yeah, but why don't we do that?
Yeah, exactly.
To, Pakistan, or Turkey, or wherever. Why don't we do it?
Absolutely right. My favourite part of the story was that on the 6th hole of the golf course he was playing was when he heard that the Colombians were turning the planes around. By the time he was on the 8th hole, it had all been sorted out.
Yeah, I mean,
he's a busy guy.
We don't have the same power as the United States have, the economic might. But I'm wondering,
But inside of Europe,
also
inside of Europe, we have that kind of power. People have been saying to me, why don't we suggest to Macron that unless he takes a bit more care in stopping the boats, we'll put a bit more tariff on what he sends to the UK.
Yeah, I mean, tariffs do end up costing. I mean, I'm not a fan of tariffs. They end up costing the consumer. It's literally a tax. It's an extra tax.
Yeah.
People worry about a little bit of a.
Or people just don't buy it.
Yeah, people don't.
I mean, I don't buy expensive champagne just because it's from France. You don't need to. You can get better stuff, which is not as expensive from here.
From England.